Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching What If Kid Naruto was an assassin of the elemental seas. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no time, let's start the story.
A young man wearing a long black woolen jacket that appeared to end just below his waist and what appeared to be a pair of bird wings was on the command and navigation deck. The ship's deck was largely bustling with activity as the crew set the ship's rigging as they entered Wave Country, a small island nation that housed their newest mission. As he approached and took out a telescope to get a better look at the island, he had a fox-like design on the side of his coat. A young woman with medium-length red hair, form-fitting clothing, and glasses approached him at this precise moment to report, saying, "It's just as we feared, cousin. He has control of every shipping port on the island. We are going to have to go ashore with the longboats to remain undetected." After closing the telescope and giving it to her, he turned to face her and gestured for her to follow him to the ship's main deck. He had piercing blue eyes that seemed to be one with the sea when you looked into them, and bright blonde hair that seemed to have been kissed by the sun itself. However, it was the whisker-like marks on his cheeks that gave him his exotic appearance from the start. He was also known as Black Fox because he liked to wear black with a hint of dark orange. "Well, if that's the case, cousin, we will just have to pay this Gado a little visit now, won't we?" He went into his cabin and started to finish putting on his own gear, but he quickly put on his sword strap and belt around his jacket and started arming himself. She nodded her head, pushed her glasses up, and then started shouting commands to the numerous sailors on board. After putting a strange-looking katana in his scabbard, he flexed his wrists to show off his hidden blades, which were as black as night itself, along with a variety of other impressive weapons at his disposal. He then turned to a picture that depicted his life before all of this. After saying this, he hurriedly left his private cabin, pulling up the black hood that concealed his identity from many, and walked back up to the ship's helm. Every man and woman who worked on board the Black Vixen, which many consider to be one of the most dangerous pirate ships in the elemental nations, had a reason for being there. In addition to being a nation of powerful merchants and sailors, they were also warriors of an ancient order, and as you can see, they were the last of the Assassin Brotherhood. They were here to restore their homeland and the way of life that had been taken from them so long ago. Tsunami screamed as one of Gado's mercenaries threw her from her house. Two of them rushed up and took her by the arms without considering her feelings, and a third came out holding her son by the back of his t-shirt. The boss said, "We only need the woman, so what should we do with this little shrimp here?" she heard one of them ask. However, the person holding the child was hit in the head by an unidentified object before any of them could speak. There was a loud bang, and his fellows watched in disbelief as his body struck the ground with a crimson liquid in the air. The final enemy heard two more loud bangs, felt sharp pain in both knees, and hit the ground screaming as he saw what appeared to be numerous men and women leaving the forest not far from the house. The man on the right was also shot right between the eyes and fell back, hitting the ground very hard before they could even comprehend what had happened. He turned to a hooded man with an orange-outlined fox on the side of his coat and said, "Just as you requested, Captain, he's still alive for interrogation." He then looked up to see one of the men carrying a rather odd-looking weapon. The fox gave him a nod before moving forward and slamming his foot into one of the wounded man's knees, causing him to scream in pain. Then, he turned to face the man and said, "Tell me, do you fear death?" in a firm voice. "Good, then you can tell me what I want to know, because if you don't you'll learn just what happens to men like you who try to murder innocent women and children in our presence," Naruto said, causing the man to nod his head. Then, in a swift, begging voice, the man said, "Please don't kill me, I was just following orders." "And what, pray tell, would those orders be?" The man begged for his life as the Black Fox looked down on him. "Our boss Gado ordered us to capture the bridge builder's daughter and his grandson and bring them to him to be used as hostages against the old man, as well as to kill the two ninjas that he hired and the ones protecting the old man as well. In order to ask the woman, 'Where would your father be today, my lady, so we might be able to save him?'" Naruto then took his foot off the man's knee and approached her. She was well versed in the world, including the identity of this young, enigmatic man, and despite what many people may have thought of Tsunami, she showed no fear of him. She pointed in the direction and said, "He's at the bridge now with the two Konoha ninja teams he hired to protect him. Get back to the Vixen right now and get her to the bridge right away and await my orders once you get there and hide in the fog," Naruto said, nodding his head at her before turning to face his crew and giving orders. The crew nodded and started to return to the ship, but before they could stop the would-be kidnapper from posing a threat to any more innocent people in the future, one of them swiftly pulled out a gun and killed him. Realizing that things were about to get really interesting, the crew turned around and watched their captain literally run up a tree and vanish into the foliage. They then started running as quickly as they could back to the ship. Who was that mother? Inari asked his mother, whom he looked up to. That the son was the captain of the Black Vixen. He's known to many as the Black Fox, and I don't pity Gato one bit. When Zabuza saw the copycat ninja himself, Kakashi Hitaki, coming in for the kill, he thought, so, this is how it ends for me and Haku. He then got a good look at the person and remarked, it's been a long time, Fox. He saw someone catch the copycat's hand just inches from piercing his and Haku's flesh. It has it not, Zabuza? The appearance of a notorious pirate and S-rank ninja, who many believed to be at least a cage level, now greatly worried Kakashi. The dogs that had been holding Zabuza in place finally vanished, allowing the former mist swordsman to move once more. After glancing at Fox, he realized why he had come in the first place, and he told Kakashi, we are no longer enemies, Hitaki. After letting Kakashi go, the Black Fox watched as the young man passed the two mist ninjas and turned to face the vanishing fog, where he saw Gato and his mercenary army waiting for them. Gazing at the group of shinobi in front of him, Gato decided to make fun of them by saying, I'm so glad I was never going to pay you, Zabuza. After all, it's far cheaper just to have my army here do it than pay you all that money. He was wearing a shit-eating grin and an air of arrogance. At this precise moment, Gato heard a rather unsettling laugh as a man wearing black and a hood came forward and said, tell me, Gato, do you fear death? In front of all the mercenaries and their employer? When Gato heard one of his mercenaries trembling, he was even more shocked than before. He turned to face the men and said, I'm not paying you to just stand there and shake in your boots. I order you to go kill that pathetic young man. But the next thing the mercenary said caught Gato off guard. Please, Captain Black Fox, don't kill me. I'll leave. I didn't mean no harm to these people. Then leave. I know you fear death. The mercenary in question navigated through the other mercenaries attempting to leave the area after the fox said this for everyone to hear, recalling the events of his previous encounter with the Black Fox and his ship and the ensuing carnage. A few years prior, when he believed he could defeat the infamous pirate known only as the Black Fox, he had told several of the other mercenaries that he would run for his life and that if they did not want to be killed by this mana who many have claimed was gifted by Davy Jones himself, they should do the same. As he moved forward and gestured off the bridge to what appeared to be a sizable fog bank that was situated off in the distance from the bridge, he saw a large black pirate ship emerge from it and turn to its side, pointing all of its guns at the mercenaries. At that point, everything the man had told them about this infamous pirate was beginning to make some sense. Gato's eyes widened as he realized that this young man was someone to be feared. The Black Fox then raised his left arm, dropped it, pointed out the mercenary army and their employer, and yelled, "Fire!" for everyone to hear. Kakashi Kurenai and his teams, along with the three young members of their squads who had been knocked out by Haku earlier, watched the previous battle or slaughter, if you want to call it that, as the Black Vixen opened fire on the bridge area containing the midget and his mercenary army in a split second, killing many of them in the first volley. The Black Vixen, a well-known pirate ship, killed the mercenaries without a second thought. When the main cannons failed to fire due to reloading, the ship's snipers up in the rigging and the crow's nest fired shots, striking many of the mercenaries in the head. Despite this, the mercenaries managed to escape the main killing area and ran straight at the Black Fox himself in the hopes of killing him once and for all. The mercenaries had little to no experience fighting someone who had been trained by the most infamous shinobi, pirates, and privateers who were only looking to clear their names. Naruto quickly activated his hidden blades, which were as black as night with gold inlay images of foxes. He also used his bloodline, which gave him all of his ancestors' memories and skills, including the more infamous ones who were also assassins and pirates. At the moment, though, he was more of a burden to his team than to his ambitions and desires for vengeance. Sasuke could only watch in complete awe of this pirate's skill level and the peculiar weapons he carried on his arms, which made him even more lethal. He was only able to observe the battle at this point, but fortunately he had activated his Sharingan and was memorizing everything he saw for use in his training and, eventually, in his retaliation. Gato was more terrified than ever before. He thought he had complete control of the situation one moment, and then he was hiding behind a portion of the bridge, hoping that he wouldn't be hit by any of the cannon shots. He even used some of his men's bodies as a shield to protect himself when he heard screaming. A moment later, he saw one of his men fly forward without a head, and a few feet away, the head hit the ground. The Black Fox then proceeded to kill the small businessman by lightly tapping the hilt of his sword with his hand. However, one of the remaining mercenaries had just risen and had succeeded in grabbing the Black Fox's hood, pulling it back, only to be shot in the head by this pirate's quick reflexes. At this point, Gato tried to flee but was shot in the leg, which caused him to fall to the ground. He then tried to crawl away in the hopes of getting away but felt a foot slim down upon his injured leg. The same young man who had been insulted by him was standing there when he looked up, begging for his miserable life, saying, "Please, I'll give you whatever you want, just spare my life." "Have you forgotten about the stories, Gato? I'm a heartless wretch to someone like you," the fox said after he simply laughed at him. After saying that, he holstered his gun and proceeded to shoot the wretched midget multiple times, emptying the clip in the process. He then walked over to Zabuza and Haku, only to hear the one-eyed leaf ninja emit a gas. He quickly turned his head to Haku and said, "I hope you have some chakra left, love. I would really like to get out of here without them trying to catch me." He then turned to the leaf ninjas, who appeared to be trying to comprehend what they were seeing, and he let out a small curse as he remembered that his hood had been pulled down. She nodded her head quickly and opened a huge ice mirror, which the three jumped through before Kakashi could reach the spot to try to knock them out. As the three of them left, the mirror appeared on the Black Vixen's deck, and one of the crew members approached Naruto and gave him a black hat with a red line on top. Then, so that the Konoha ninjas could see and hear him, he walked to the ship's railing and yelled, "I would say it was a pleasure seeing you again, Cyclops, but that would be a lie. Just know that you had a chance to capture Captain Naruto Uzumaki." Upon reaching the bridge's edge, Kurenai couldn't help but exclaim, "That has got to be the best pirate I have ever seen, Kakashi. You have no idea how important he is, Kurenai. We need answers about him, otherwise we will be in the dark about him forever," he said, turning to face her with a slightly irate expression. "Is there a pub for sailors here in the village?" Kakashi then approached Tazuna. "Yes, there is. I can take you to it later if you want." The two young girls simply nodded and went to work after hearing Sasuke mutter something about wanting that power. "Thank you, but first things first. I need everyone to help us get them back to the house immediately. Sakura Hinata, get as many of those needles out as you can out of them right now so we can get them back to the house where you two can remove the rest later." Later that night, Tazuna took them to the Deep Blue pub. As soon as the two ninjas stepped inside, they heard a sea shanty song sung by a number of men dressed in women. The lyrics went something like, "Yo-ho yo-ho, a pirate's life for me. Allow me to introduce you to Captain Holloway. Captain, allow me to introduce you to Hidden Leaf Ninjas Kakashi and Kurenai," Tazuna said, bringing them over to have a look at the ninjas after they noticed an elderly sailor with a black beard sipping rum on a wooden leg. The sailor grinned. "I know why you're all here. You want to know about Hima, you want to know about the Black Fox?" The elderly sea salt then simply smiled at them and gestured for them to sit down. He chuckled a little before saying, "I was a pirate once, you know, and I thought myself the most feared man but fair who ever sailed these waters, but this young man..." They nodded their heads together. He then gave them all a little rum before continuing to tell them his tale. "He was the one who saved me and sent me here. It was time I retired anyway, but it's what I saw him do to those slavers who worked for the people made us all pirates, and the first Placia I saw him single-handedly clear the deck of a water country ship, saving the doomed souls aboard and killing the people any in his path. They say the legendary goddess herself, Calypso, and the spirit of Davy Jones himself blessed the Black Fox with amazing powers and the contract to some amazing creatures that once roamed the seas." As the old salt took another drink, he continued, "I saw him fighting like the devil himself, cutting them down with absolutely no problem or mercy, and when we found out that he was from that clan and nation, we knew just how dangerous he was going to be. And he's a cunning one, oh yes, he knows his way around the elemental seas better than anyone." By this time, the entire pump had stopped whatever they were doing and they were listening to the Black Fox story. It's even said that he has the respect of the seven swordsmen themselves, so if it's fortune and fame you seek as well as freedom from our oppressors, then Captain Naruto Uzumaki is your man. The old man began his story again after taking another drink, and Kakashi and the others were listening intently. "Just a word of warning to you all. Don't meddle in his private affairs, for there is more mystery to that man than even I dare ask." After learning from Naruto that the civil war was at last over and that those responsible had been dealt with appropriately, Zabuza walked the deck of the Black Vixen for the first time feeling hopeful. He was also pleased to learn that his longtime friend Mei had been appointed the new water shadow of the Hidden Mist Village. As the powerful black ship made its way back to its secret harbor and then to what remained of the three once great naval powers that had saved so many lives, Zabuza Momochi, the master of the executioner blade, merely looked up at the moment. However, their enemies would lament that they were reduced to nothing more than pirates due to human greed, as this action would have allowed them to keep their freedom, honor, and the ability to restore the world. "Have you ever been to this shipwreck cove, as they call it?" he asked as his adopted daughter Haku approached him and spoke to him. He then turned to face her, saying, "Once a long time ago. Back then it was just a hidden military base that the three great naval powers used, but now it's one of our few hopes to save our way of life." Then she decided to ask another question. "How do you know that pirate lord up there, father, and is he really as terrifying as they say?" After noticing the young pirate lord on the bridge, he laughed under his bandages and continued, "Well, he's much like myself when it comes to his friends, but if you're an enemy, he lacks my merciful nature and sense of fair play as well as a good temper. I met him when he just started his training to use that sword of his, which is said to have been created by the same swordsmith who created the blades for our little group. I was unaware that he made more than just the 7. Haku was shocked to learn that the swords were made exclusively for the 7 swordsmen of the mist, despite having been informed that they were extremely rare. "Well, my daughter, he also made all the blades that the pirate lords themselves used. Of this little group here, there are 7 of them as well, but Naruto would have gotten one anyways, considering who and what he is." As the young redhead and the other young man approached the pirate lord, she watched him go about his business and asked her father, "You mean because he's an Uzumaki and an assassin?" "Well, you're half right, but believe me, he still had to earn that blade of his. But let me ask you something, daughter, do you have a crush on him?" Zabuza said, laughing when he heard this question. She flushed when her adoptive father told her, "You're not helping." After approaching the ship's railing and gazing out at the sea in awe of the moonlight dancing on the water's surface, Naruto heard sounds far behind them and turned to see his first mate Suigetsu and cousin Karen. When he turned to face his cousin, they remarked, "I didn't think they were going to find out who I was so fast." With a shark-like grin and teeth clenched, Suigetsu rolled his eyes and uttered, "Well, as you're so fond of saying, Fox, nothing ever lasts." In all of her red-headed splendor, Karen simply slapped him across the back of the head, causing it to turn to water. She then looked at her cousin and replied, "Yeah, but they're ninjas, not pirates, so I didn't think they know very much about you anyways, and let's face it, you're quite notorious for escapes and getting out of a very sticky situations. But seriously, I have to ask you a question. What happens if you gain the opportunity to go back to the Hidden Leaf and it's not for a job?" Karen said again, and Naruto could only roll his eyes at their antics. "Oh, you know me, cousin. I love those moments. I like to wave at them as they pass by them and give them the bird, if you get my meaning," he said, smiling at her and speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. He rubs his head and picks up his hat before turning to Suigetsu and saying, "Well, you are in command and the ship is yours until morning. Oh, and one more thing, if you damage my ship I'm going to kill you." She was shocked by his words once more and struck him in the back of the head as well. She then went down to her private cabin to rest for the night and wait for the morning shift. Needless to say, Suigetsu promptly grabbed the wheel as if his life depended on it. This is true despite what many people may believe, because he had first-hand experience of fearing the Black Fox and his cousin in similar circumstances. The Black Vixen's captain's cabin was not very large, but it was more than sufficient for one person. In fact, it was large enough for him and at least 7 people to live comfortably. Naruto then went inside his main cabin and closed the door behind him. No matter what people said to him, the crew had witnessed the ship become his home because he was now one with the sea. After returning to his desk, he pulled out a chair to sit on, took off his hat, and set it on top of the desk that held the charts of the elemental nations. He then grabbed a bottle of rum and quickly drank it before looking at a picture of a young, blonde boy and a red-headed, green-eyed woman. He felt a little hurt by what he was seeing and realized that he had worked so hard to put the incident behind him, but he could not forget what had happened to them both. His mother had given him a small crab-shaped music box, which he unintentionally hit while reaching over to pick up the picture. As he listened to the song it was playing, He felt his emotions take over, including a single tear from his right eye. He touched it to see the tiny drop of salty water on his finger, and he started to feel both pain and rage at the people who had taken so much from him in the first place. Suigetsu, the former apprentice of the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist, approached Haku and smiled like a shark when he finally plucked up the courage to speak with her about the Black Fox. "So what's on your mind?" Haku asked. "I was just curious about Naruto, or as you all call him, the Black Fox. What can you tell me about him?" she said after giving him one of those looks. Despite being somewhat surprised by her inquiry, Suigetsu chose to provide her with some information, saying, "I can only tell you so much." "Well, how did you and that red-headed girl end up on this ship for starters, and how did he become what he is, and is he really so terrifying as people say?" Haku inquired. Suigetsu chuckled a little before starting to tell her a condensed version of the story, saying, "I can tell you some things but not everything, okay?" She gave him a nod and then continued, "From what I know, he was 6 years old when something terrible happened to him in his home village that set him on this path. Some family friends who were very powerful, I might add, managed to get him out of that village and get him to his ancestral home." "You mean the Whirlpool village?" "I will neither confirm nor deny which village, but anyways, moving on. Once he got there, he began to training in the ways of the shinobi and eventually discovered his nation's unique maritime history, including this ship, which he began to repair and refit so that it could sail once more. He also possesses some kind of bloodline that allows him to relive his ancestors' memories, including 2 of them who were notorious pirates in their days." "So he was experiencing his ancestors' memories?" Haku asked, looking surprised by what Suigetsu had just told her. "Oh, not just experiencing them but also gaining their skills as well. From the stories I've heard, by the time he was 10 years old he was already a master seaman and have trained in his other ancestral roots." "So how did you get involved with him?" she asked him after glancing out at the ship. He cracked a joke while making a change and then said, "That's an interesting story in its own right, so I'll give you an abridged version. Basically, he was already a pirate lord when he pulled up on one of Orochimaru's secret laboratories where me and Karen were being held against our will, and in my case already been experimented upon." He observed the shocked expression on her face and proceeded to say, "What the snake wasn't counting on that day was that Black Fox decided to pay him a visit and then rescue not only me and Karen but also a young girl named Isaribi, and an even bigger surprise when he met his sister who had been kidnapped before he was even born by the snake Sanin." Hearing this further did not surprise Haku, who understood that she would need to approach his family in order to learn more about him. "He has a sister?" she asked. "Oh yeah, he does. Just wait till you meet her. We will be at Shipwreck Cove in a couple of days and then you'll get to meet her firsthand." Kakashi had sent word ahead of them to set up an emergency meeting with the Hokage and councils, so the 2 Jonin and their squads hurried back to their home village as soon as they were certain that their client was safe and sound from any further danger. As they entered the room for the council meeting, one of the Anbu standing guards hurriedly opened the doors for them and gestured for them to come in. The 2 Jonin sensei hurried in as the door was closed behind them, bowed slightly to the Hokage, also known as the Fire Shadow, and started to report on what had transpired. When Kurenai started to explain the confrontation on the bridge and who exactly had interfered, the Council of Konoha was on the edge of their seats and quite concerned. They were initially shocked that such a simple mission had become so dangerous for a newly formed Genin squad, which also happened to include the heir of the Uchiha clan and another team that had to be sent to act as backup. Kakashi was in the process of using his signature jutsu, the Chidorel, to eliminate our opponent, a rank threat level shinobi Zabuza Momochi, who was at this time contained until a person managed to stop Kakashi dead in his tracks just a few inches from both Zabuza and his young apprentice. We were able to identify this individual as the notorious pirate or privateer known as the Black Fox. Since their shipping companies had encountered this man and only 2 of them had committed crimes, many civilian merchants were shocked to learn of this. Meanwhile, the others were grateful for his assistance because the water country navy had grown more pirate-like than the ones they had initially labeled pirates. The ninja didn't have to wait long as Kurenai went on with her report, but the Shinobi Council knew that there was still more to come and that it would cause the room to burst into chaos and arguments among all of the people, including the civilians. Zabuza's former employer at this time was the shipping tycoon Gato, who had decided to not pay him and ordered his execution as well as our own until one of the mercenaries recognized the Black Fox and pleaded for his life. However, Gato still did not believe that this was the pirate lord that he should be afraid of. They listened to everything she said with bated breaths, Then the Black Fox's vessel appeared out of the fog bank off the bridge and opened fire upon the mercenaries, killing almost all of them. Several, however, did manage to engage the pirate lord and were quickly dispatched without even one of them able to touch him, except for this one man that grabbed a hold of his hood and pulled it down, which allowed us to later identify him, but not before he was able to finish off Gato. He then turned around to confront Zabuza and his apprentice, and only for us to become aware of his identity at that time. Kakashi was able to properly identify him as one Naruto Uzumaki. Everyone was now paying close attention to her story and was growing increasingly interested in learning more about this pirate. Everyone started arguing or talking among themselves as soon as she said this, and after a minute the third Hokage had had enough and, using his ki, made his presence known by shouting, "Enough," for everyone to hear. The third then turned to face the two Jonin and said, "You are positive that you have discovered the Uzumaki heir potential location and what activities he is now pursuing?" In a cool, authoritative voice that only the village chief could muster. She replied, "Yes, sir." When the third asked, "Has word of this gotten out to the village yet?" They both exchanged glances. "You have Sakura Haruno on your team, don't you?" Ino's father said after realizing why they had exchanged glances. Kakashi was only able to nod when they heard the third Hokage utter the words, "Shit." Many people believed that the Willow Tree Tavern in Konoha's Hidden Leaf Village was the most well-liked place to eat and rest after a long mission. The Rookie Nine, as they were known, were reunited for the first time in weeks. Tenten, the only female member and weapons expert on the team, was seated at the table with the rookies and one member of Team Guy. Hinata and her teammate Kiba were busy bringing over a number of drinks and food. "Okay, forehead, what happened out there? I mean, you were supposed to be going on a C rank mission and then their team is sent out and I hear rumors it's like up to what now, like a B rank now?" Ino asked her as they sat down and distributed food and drinks to everyone in the group. Despite being somewhat surprised that the rumors were true, Sakura and Kiba agreed to correct the record regarding their special mission. "Actually, it's more like an A rank, pig. I think me and Kiba should just tell you all what happened on the mission." As Sakura began to tell her story, the others settled down. "Well, it all started with a simple C-rank escort mission that we were sent on to escort a master bridge builder back to his home village in Wave Country," she said. "After a day we eventually saw this puddle sitting in the middle of the road and realized it had not rained for a while. Genjutsu was what everyone was thinking. And then these two missing. Nin suddenly just jumped right out of the puddle and went on the attack. At first we thought they had killed Kakashi-sensei and then went after the client. Fortunately for him, Sasuke and Sai managed to prevent them from getting to the client, and then it was revealed that our sensei had in fact faked his own death and then took them out fast and then discovered what was really going on. Their story had captured Choji's attention, and he was impatient, and then? She went on to explain, "Well, we found out that our client had lied about the details of the mission and that it was in fact much more serious than we had first expected it to be. We all agreed to continue the mission, but Kakashi-sensei sent for backup to arrive at the village only a little bit after we did." The story was now being told in the pub, and everyone was curious to see what would happen next. So anyways, by the next day we finally made it to the island containing the village and were attacked by a mist ninja known as Zabuza. Tenten's expression changed as she continued, "Your sensei fought one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist, and from what I've heard, one of the most dangerous members they ever had." She heard people mumbling and chatting among themselves as soon as she said this. Yeah, they fought like hell, and eventually it looked like Zabuza was going to win as he had managed to capture Kakashi-sensei in a jutsu called the Water Prison. But luckily Sasuke and Sai put an emergency plan in action and managed to set him free, Sakura said, nodding her head as everyone grew even more interested and attentive. After Sakura finished her story, she said, "With that done, Sensei then managed to defeat Zabuza, but before he could deliver the final blow to finish him off, we were interrupted by a fake hunter. Nin who put him in a false death-like state. After they disappeared, it was revealed that Sensei had used up a lot of his chakra. We had to carry him to the client's house and hope for the reinforcements that had been sent, for which is where Kiba's story starts." The shinobi in the tavern were genuinely impressed by the two genins' cooperation in saving their sensei. The young man and his dog caught everyone's attention. After a brief drink, he began his portion of the tale, saying, "We arrived the next day to discover that there, since he had just regained consciousness, and informed us that the threat was still alive and would probably re-engage us within a week. Both of our teachers ordered immediate training to prepare for the showdown. As though she had fantasized as a child about facing one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist or even one of the 7 pirate lords. Tenten was now quite curious about what would happen. So for that entire week we trained as hard as we could, but as it turns out we made one critical mistake when the week was up, Kiba said after taking a bite out of some of the food and another drink. Then, one of the bar's ninjas had to ask him, what was the mistake? As soon as he finished, he noticed that almost everyone in the tavern was staring at him with their mouths open and their eyes as large as dinner plates. We didn't think that the client's family was in any danger, but they were if it weren't for the appearance of the Black Fox. They probably would have been killed. They met one of the most notorious pirates and lived? Yelled one of the ninjas in the room for everyone to hear. Yes, he saved them, but by this time Misasake and Sai had faced the fake hunter. Nin, who had some strange bloodline that made these strange ice mirrors, and I might add kicked our asses good, while her sensei engaged Zabuza once more and was about to end him until the Black Fox popped up and stopped him dead in his tracks. This was the second time the 2 teams that had traveled to Wave Country were still attempting to learn as much as they could about the fox. Everyone was taken aback by what they had just learned. But if you think that's weird, then get this, Zabuza's employer, a guy named Gato, then appeared at the other side of the bridge with a small army of mercenaries, and basically betrayed them. However, he underestimated the fox, who then pointed off the bridge at this big black ship with black sails just came right out of this fog bank, and with one order from this guy opened up on the mercenary army, killing almost all of them in the process, and those who managed to get out of the killing zone went right at the fox, only for him to activate these strange blades on his arms and cut them down without even a thought. Now one of them did manage to pull down this black hood he had on, but that didn't even slow them down. As he walked up to Gato, took out this strange weapon, shot him in his leg, and walked up to him again, taunted him, and killed him right there for everyone to see, the speaker said, breaking the silence in the room. Sakura then chose to go on with the story, saying, but that's not all. As soon as he turned back to speak to Zabuza, our sensei gasped in recognition of the Black Fox and even tried to defeat him. But he managed to get away thanks to those strange mirrors once more. He then reappeared on the ship's deck and yelled for us all to hear, "You almost captured Captain Naruto Uzumaki." As they surveyed the room and everyone in it, they were all startled by the sounds of objects hitting the floor, such as beer mugs. But Tenten broke the silence by asking, "Are you kidding me? You're telling us that one of the most dangerous, powerful, and notorious pirate lords is from this village and has been missing for over a decade?" She added, shocking them with her statement. This information shocked Ino and her team, and Tenten went on, "If what you say is the truth, then this village and country will stop at nothing to get their hands on him again. I mean, he's pretty much a noble and is the heir to an entire country. I don't blame the kid for running away from this village," the rookies heard older ninjas nearby say. "After all, would you want to stay here when your only family is killed in front of you and the village does nothing at all to provide you with justice?" After swiftly paying their bills, many of the ninjas hurried out of the pub to tell others about what they had just heard. Haku and Zabuza were astonished by what they had witnessed thus far when the Black Vixen pulled into Shipwreck Cove's main docking area. They looked out onto the bay and were startled to see 3 man-of-wars wearing both the Water Country and the Resistance emblems. They also realized that Mei was definitely waiting for them. Following Naruto, his cousin, and Suigetsu off the ship, the 2 of them entered the Red Sailor, a tavern that appeared to be very busy and had 3 bouncers who appeared to have witnessed multiple battles. However, they allowed Naruto and his group to pass without any problems and even gave them a respectful nod before returning to their work. A young redhead woman then gestured for them to follow her up some stairs that were also under guard as they entered the tavern. In fact, Zabuza and Haku were taken aback when they saw Mei and the new Water Country daimyo seated at a table with 3 other individuals that Naruto recognized right away and approached, along with the young redhead woman. The Mei continued, "Well, I see we still have 4 living mariner lords among us, and I see that the old fox has brought you back to us, Zabuza. Well, I'm just happy that you sent him to get me in time for me and my apprentice here would have holes in our chest right now," Zabuza said after giving her a nod. After grinning and turning to face Naruto, Mei said, "Nice work, Fox, but I'm afraid there is more I must ask of you and the others here as well." This caught Naruto's eye and she went on to say, "Now, as you may or may not be aware, the Chunin exams will be held in the Hidden Leaf village within the next 9 days, and I would like for you and your 2 officers here as well as another team to enter the exam under the flag of the Hidden Mist village to represent both us and Water Country as a whole." The four mariner lords, or pirate lords as the rest of the world had come to refer to them, and the red-headed woman simply stared at her as though her head were off her body. At first, she wasn't sure how to react to their silence and open mouths, but then all five of them began pointing fingers accusingly at her and saying things that contradicted her plan. "Are you out of your damn mind?" Tayuya asked Naruto and the red-headed woman who turned out to be his older sister. "Why the hell are you sending him into that hellhole of a village and for what?" inquired Jack Webb, the next lord to speak up. Minerva the Ice Queen, who was wearing a plain outfit that seemed to work well in colder climates but would not be a hindrance in warmer ones, said, "I will not let you sacrifice one of us for your damn plan, woman. Can we just shoot this woman right now and be done with it for her stupid and crazy idea?" Lady Rouge, the voodoo queen of lightning, was a dark-skinned woman with white face paint over her face that highlighted a skull-like appearance but still showed off her stunning beauty with long flowing black hair and a distinctive hat on her head. She had anticipated some of this and had to explain her plan to them in order to win their support. She concluded her time in Shipwreck Cove by saying, Now all of you allow me to explain why I have asked Naruto and his crew to do this, but first." Mei was feared by almost everyone and could essentially intimidate any man with a simple smile and a sweet word about their death, but she was completely terrified of the Mariner Lords because she could not intimidate them at all. "Before I can explain my plan to you all, I have to perform my duty here," Tayuya said as she approached the table and pulled out the remnants of a sword, capturing everyone's attention. The blade was immediately identified as that of one of their fallen lords, and they said, "He chose you, Tayuya, to be the next Mariner Lord to take his place as the Lord of the Crescent Moon Sea." Together with Mei, who was still carrying the broken blade in its box, the four current Mariner Lords gestured for her to follow them as they left the tavern and made their way a short distance to a small blacksmith shop that appeared to be highly respected by the large crowd. The shopkeeper moved forward to pick up the sword's handle and place it in Tayuya's hands, only to discover that it was glowing brightly and burning her hand. As the blade's hilt burned her hand, the other four Mariner Lords felt their own marks burn, just like they had when they were made Lords of the Seas. "The previous Lord and the blade have chosen you and find you worthy to wield this blade and the responsibilities, but because it is broken it must be made new and I will require something you hold dear to make the new blade," the old blacksmith said, gesturing for his apprentice to step forward. Tayuya took her first flute out of her pocket, which her mother had given her. It was made of gold and silver and had the whirlpool symbol engraved on it. She gave it to the smith, who nodded and went to work. Since this man or myth was in charge of creating and maintaining their blades, the Mariner Lords listened to the sounds of the blacksmith and the 7 swordsmen member present. They also knew that their apprentice would carry on this man's legacy. Tayuya grabbed the blade and held it up for everyone to see when the smith returned a few hours later with a brand new blade and a set of hidden blades made from the broken remains of the previous Mariner Lord. Each Mariner Lord revealed his own blade and said, "I, Captain Jack Webb, Lord of the Waters Country Coast, hereby recognize you as one of us." The blade was a perfect silver with a crescent moon embedded in it, and the hilt had a small flute built into it. The blade appeared to radiate the moon's light. A woman who appeared prepared for the cold followed, saying, "I, Minerva, Lord of the Snow Seas, recognizes you as one of us." After that, it was the turn of the following girl. "I, Lady Rouge of the Lightning Seas, hereby recognizes you as one of us." "I, Naruto Uzumaki, Lord of the Whirlpool Seas, hereby recognize you as one of us, sister," her brother said after that. In front of everyone in attendance, she took a close look at the blade and put on the blades of her assassin ancestry before declaring, "I, Tayuya Uzumaki, hereby accept the position of Mariner Lord of the Crescent Moon Seas." "Now that that is done, at least let me explain why I need your help in this matter. Who knows, you might actually enjoy it," Mei said, gesturing for the 5 of them to follow her as they sheathed their swords. "Now, as you are all aware, the war cost us all greatly in the long run. The council and myself have decided that we need to make a good impression to potential clients, and the only place to do that quickly is in the Chunin exams, which are being held in the Hidden Leaf," Mei said, pouring herself a drink before turning to the Mariner Lords to explain everything. "I can understand your desire to impress potential clients, but why the hell do you need us?" said Naruto after taking a shot of rum. "Because out of the entire Mariner Lords that I know of, you and many of your crew are the only ones with significant shinobi training," he said, causing Mei to roll her eyes. Lady Rouge nodded her head in agreement, saying, "All right, I get it, but why is sending them in so crucial?" Mei pointed to Naruto and said, "I'm glad you asked that one, Rouge, because he is the only one here who knows the village inside and out. Naruto then said, "Okay, what the hell is going to happen?" as he and his two female relatives exchanged glances before turning back to Mei. She concluded, then saw that everyone was staring at one another. "Well, as you know, ever since you basically kicked the snake Sanin right in the balls, he's been basically building up his forces and, as you know, plotting his revenge against the Hidden Leaf as well as Fire Country. The Chunin tests." They all uttered those words simultaneously. After remaining silent for the most part, the water daimyo felt compelled to say, "Okay guys, that was just creepy the way you all did that. It looks like we finally get our chance to give a little payback to the snake freak," Tayuya said with a simple smile. After giving her a smile and nodding his head, Naruto remarked, "Wouldn't it be preferable if there were two teams competing rather than just one?" The fire daimyo himself, who had just read the report, was seated in the chair of the third Hokage at the head of the Land of Fire's emergency military council meeting. Needless to say, he wasn't happy about it at any rate, so as I am to understand this gentleman, one of the most notorious pirate lords as our enemy call him and his fellow mariner lords, and you now tell me that he is in fact one Naruto Uzumaki who disappeared from your village at the age of 6 years and shortly after the death of his mother. The third Hokage continued, "Yes my lord, we only became aware of this a short time ago thanks to a mission to Wave Country in its village." After nodding his head, the fire daimyo turned to his admiralty and said, "I have repeatedly requested that you all grant them safe harbor licenses so they can use them without the Land of Water learning about it. Now we discover that one of them was born in our country, has the rights to an entire nation, and may be the only one who can even locate it. You also mentioned to me that they might be an enemy." Some of them had argued the same point, but the older members and some of the younger members, who had been intimidated by the mariner lords and their abilities, shot them down, so the admiralty remained silent. And then the fire daimyo turned to his senior analyst and said, "What do we know about the Black Fox?" In order to present his report, one of the admirals who had attempted to assist the mariner lords in their struggle against oppression opened a sizable file that read, "All of our files and information that we have on the Black Fox or Naruto Uzumaki is very limited at best. We can't even give you a proper rundown on his ship other than the fact that it is perhaps a frigate with at least 40 long-range cannons aboard and that it is, for the lack of a better word, pitch black from the hull to the canvas sails." Then the fire daimyo inquired, "How is his own fighting ability?" The same admiral continued with a different report, "Like all pirates he does use firearms, but they are very loud and not effective in our hidden village's area of expertise. But from what we do know, he has an impressive array of other skills including ninjutsu and is a known sword master." Then, a civilian who had accompanied the third Hokage to this summit said, "I can vouch for that as I saw him in action myself. It was about 2 years ago and my ship the Lunar was en route to the Crescent Moon Kingdom to deliver a shipment of Fire Country sake." Everyone was riveted by his account as he continued, "As is common among our merchant guilds, we made sure to stay as far away from the border of Water Country due to the civil war at the time. However, we were intercepted by a Water Nation naval vessel that claimed we were in their territorial waters, and for us to surrender or die, we decided to make a run for it knowing that we were still within international waters at the time and were fired upon us, which killed 7 members of the crew with the first volley they fired at us." Everyone was now taken aback that this incident hadn't initially made it to this council. They then prepared to board us by force, but before they could even set foot on our deck we heard the sound of cannon fire. Their primary deck was ripped apart by the cannon shot. We then saw this black ship come right out of the fog and ram them head on. I then saw all of these men and women who then come aboard the enemy ship's main deck and started to fight all of the Water Nation troops aboard. I saw the 3 senior officers of this ship cutting them down like they were nothing at all in the world. The one I later found out who was the Black Fox wasted no time making his way up to their command deck. "Can you describe his personal fighting style?" asked one of the admirals, who had a distinctive set of scars on his face. The civilian continued with a sense of reminiscence his tone. "Well, the first time I saw him was when he came out of the ball throwing away to his sides 2 personal hands that had blown the heads off of 2 water soldiers and then unsheathed his sword, which was like nothing I have ever seen before, and I have seen the 7 swordsman blades before. It was as black as night itself with gold inlay that had boxes on and a whirlpool-like design in the blade itself, which seemed to have real seawater in the design that glowed blue. He was faster than anyone I have ever seen and cut them down like they were nothing to him," he said, as the entire room listened and recorded his every word. Then, in a single moment, he dove behind one of his opponents and brought his sword back, cutting the man in 2 at the waist. and started dodging projectiles while slicing and dicing his way to the ship's bridge. When he tried to move the ship away from his vessel, we saw him actually do something with his blade that caused it to split in two before he killed the remaining officers. He next brushed his hair with his hand and continued telling the tale. The Black Fox then separated us from the water country ship and told us to head to our destination and that they would stay in the area hunting anymore violated the rules of the international waters. He had even had his crew repaired the damage to our vessel as they then returned to their ship and moved back into the fog. We then heard some kind of sound coming from the damaged water bus and saw that the Black Fox had left the captain alive only to watch the ship and its treacherous crew literally be pulled down into the water by some unknown means. This statement startled one of the admirals, who asked, "What do you mean it was pulled down?" As everyone tried to comprehend this new information, the civilian said, "I'm saying that it looked like it had been grabbed by something and broken in two in the center of the ship and then pulled down to the watery depths or to Davy Jones's lock." The fire daimyo was taken aback by everything he's seen and made the choice to decide the matter. "Based upon what information I have and what has been gathered for me, I hereby decree that we are to leave the Black Fox alone and attempt to at least convince him to return to his home, which is us. I will also try to gain information from the land of water through diplomatic means if possible, but we must approach everything with him cautiously, as I will not be responsible for an international incident involving him, and neither will any of you, including you, Admiral Scarlet." The man with 3 claw marks or scars on his face, Admiral Scarlet, had some personal ties to the Uzumaki clan. He simply nodded his head to the daimyo, but he was enraged with his leader and clutched his small red cross, even spitting blood in the process. Naruto, accompanied by his 2 first mates, said, "Once I'm done with the water daimyo and I will be popping back on board the ship once we are en route. Get all the cargo you can stored below decks and have the crew stay at battle stations until we make it to the land of fire." The 5 Mariner Lords' ships were busy bringing in every piece of gear and cargo they could carry as they prepared to set out for their mission to the land of fire. Naruto could only grin at their antics as they swiftly nodded and boarded the ship, barking orders. One of the crew members noticed him and escorted him below decks to the war room, which was prepared. Once inside, he discovered the other lords standing in front of a large table in the middle of the room, with Mei and the daimyo waiting for him. Now, as you are all aware that almost every one of the major villages except for ours and the Land of Wind's hidden village has a stadium that is used for the Chunin exams once a year. What I dealt the village realizes is that this is the perfect opportunity for Orochimaru to not only gain entry into the village but also launch a surprise attack upon the village itself, Mei said, shocking everyone by purchasing a small container that contained multiple sea charts of the Land of Fire's coastline. Naruto and Tayuya approached the war table and met Mei's eyes. The cleverness of the snake's scheme shocked and impressed Naruto and his sister, who said, "The Chunin exams are a perfect opportunity for him to attack, but it's something that none of the normal villages would even remotely consider doing because of the financial risk that is at play here." The other marine lords were inquisitive about his. He continued, "The exams in their own right are a replacement for war. Sometimes they work, but they are also an opportunity for all of the villages participating to gain future clients and to promote their genin to the next rank, so for any of them to even consider a sneak attack on another village's exams would be seen as potential suicide, as you might lose both respect and trust as well as potential clients by doing so." Jack gave a nod and sent, "And we all know that while the snake now has a village of his own, he still operates outside of normal laws and will not hesitate to cripple his old village even at the destruction of his own if need be." Tayuya gave a nod of her head and, "You're right, except he's not stupid and will try to keep the village going no matter what, but he's also a realist too, and if he doesn't do something to the Land of Fire to hurt them as well, they will just rebuild the Hidden Leaf and all of his scheming will be for nothing, so he has to deal with the Grande Fire Fleet as well." The water daimyo continued, "We have also obtained information that the Land of Rice, where his ninja village is located, has been absorbing some of our renegade navy that we are still hunting at this time, which makes any attack upon the Land of Fire with any of us present an act of war with them as well. So when the time comes to attack, we strike them at their heart. That's why you wanted all of us to come?" Lady Rouge asked with a smile. The daimyo nodded her head before speaking. "That is correct, my Lady Rouge. The Water Council would only allow me to spare 3 of our brand new dreadnoughts for this operation and are keeping the rest close to home just in case any of the rogues decided to start a surprise attack upon us. That is where you all come in, as you are extremely experienced sailors and warriors as well as warships are heavily armed for these kinds of engagements. When we arrive at the Land of Fire, We should anchor here near this military base, which is the only logical choice for the snake to attack, because without this main base it would be a very long time for the Fire Navy to recover, if any at all. Naruto then opened the charts and placed them on the table for everyone to see, including the Water Fleet Admiral, an old friend. He added, "We can also set up anchor in this part of the bay, which will give us plenty of room to maneuver and keep us far away from the Fire Navy so that they do not see us as a threat." His remarks that, "Why this military base?" piqued Minerva's interest. He looked at the maps and said, "This is their primary military base, and it also has their dry docks and shipyards as well as supply lines for both the fleet and their hidden village." With a nod, the young man said, "I'll need a copy of these charts so that we may enter the harbor according." He nodded to him and kept asking questions. "I know from personal experience that the Konoha exams will take upwards of 6 weeks to complete, with a month-long preparation for the final exam. But to complete we need 3 members on each team and a sensei Soa who is going to be our senseis." When 2 of the 7 swordsmen appeared to answer his question, the Black Fox grinned and said, "Oh yeah, I'm taking Fish Face." Since everyone was shocked by the request and even more shocked to hear that this was a weapon used by Uzumaki, Sasuke Uchiha had been wandering the village from one weapons store to another in an attempt to locate the odd weapons he had witnessed the Black Fox use on the bridge that day. He approached the 10 Blades, the only weapon store he knew might specialize in exotic weapons, as all the store owners had dubbed it, and realized that this might be his only chance to locate this unusual weapon that would aid him in his quest for vengeance. After entering the store and surveying its impressive inventory, he noticed Tenten standing slightly behind the counter, constantly working on a set of daggers that were being claimed and maintained. He approached the counter and made a noise to attract her attention. "May I help you with something, Sasuke?" Tenten asked, turning to face the Uchiha heir who was standing patiently at her family's counter, waiting for her to serve him. He raised his eyebrows and said, "You might be the only shop that can help me find what I'm looking for. Many of the other shops all told me that the weapon I'm looking for either doesn't exist or is very exotic and that they are not given for producing it. Many of them recommended your weapon store." As she halted the maintenance she was doing and went into the back of the store, she became aware of this and called out to her father, "Dad, I got a special commission up here." When Sasuke heard heavy footsteps coming from the back room as she made her way back to the front counter, she saw a 6'2" man with a large scar over his left eye, an eye patch on his left eye, and a slight limp. The man looked at Sasuke for a moment before saying, in a somewhat deep voice, "All right young man, what's this special order you be wanting?" The shop owner was shocked by the young Uchiha's request and description, so he pointed to a book with an odd symbol that looked like the letter A on it, opened it to a specific page, placed it in front of his prospective customer, and then confidently asked, "Is this what you seek?" Sasuke then started to explain what he had seen to him, doing everything he could to remember every detail about the strange blades and even some of the Black Fox's movements in the hopes that they would help identify the weapon and that he could hopefully make one. "That's the weapon that he was using, can you make it?" Sasuke asked, his eyes widening. "I'm afraid that this particular weapon may be just a little too exotic even for my shop, as while I am aware of their existence I do not know any of their internal workings to create one of them," the shop owner said after noticing that even his daughter appeared to be salivating over the idea of this unusual weapon. Both of them were taken aback when he kept going, "Believe me, if I could make one I would have long ago, but this is an assassin weapon. This weapon is where the term a blade in the crowd came from. It is extremely effective in quick assassinations, but in the right hands it can be an aggressive hand combat weapon as well. May I inquire how you came about the description of this weapon?" Then, to their surprise, Sasuke started to explain, saying, "It happened on the mission to Wave Country and I saw it being used by the notorious pirate the Black Fox." "Did he have this symbol anywhere on his body?" Tenten's father then asked, closing the book and pointing to the symbol on it. With a nod, Sasuke said, "So some of them still exist." They were both taken aback when he continued, "The weapons are called hidden blades and are one of the most formidable weapons that are used by the Assassin Brotherhood, but they were thought to be extinct thanks to the last great shinobi war. These weapons were very rare anyways and only issued to assassins. This pirate or privateer, as I think he really is probably the one of the last in existence and probably extreme well trained and probably the only one who would know if there are any more of them in existence or if the plans to create them have survived. So I have to go find a pirate to get me one of these weapons?" "I'm afraid so. There are however knockoffs, but they are nowhere near the standards of these weapons, and that is one of the reasons why no one wants them at all. I don't even carry them for that very reason. The proprietor of the shop stated that the book was close to him. Could you create a pair of them for me if I got you the plans? Was the next question Sasuke posed to the store owner. It's possible, but I need to see them to know for certain. Like I said, these are very complicated weapons and I need to know what I'm doing, so yes, if you can get the plans and pay for it, I'll make a set, he replied. Now that he had a new goal, Sasuke could only smile. When Scarlet entered his private booth with a bottle of his favorite beverage, he was startled to see one of his fellow soldiers sitting there in the shadows, his lone red Sharingan glowing dimly. Scarlet put the bottle down in front of him and asked his fellow soldier, "What are you doing here?" The stranger remarked, "Is that any way to greet an old friend, Scar?" Scarlet growled a bit and then said in a harsh tone, "Don't you dare call that. You should have killed her when you had the chance and not used her to set that damn fox free upon that village. You set every single one of our plans back years by doing that." The outsider cracked a joke. "Oh, like going to kill his mother and then losing one of our biggest prizes, which we now find out is one of our biggest problems to date, and it's all thanks to you, Scar." "Oh, I would like to take credit for that, but I honestly can't. All I know is that someone among us did that deed. I was in that village that day on other business just like you," Scarlet said after taking a large sip of his liquor. My eyes narrowed slightly as I said, "So you are telling the truth? I'd be lying if I said I didn't believe you." After taking another drink and touching his face in remembrance of the past, Scarlet made the decision to focus on the present. "So why are you here?" he asked. "To give you a much-needed warning, and I was thinking of not to, but now what the hell. Our former friend the Snake will be attacking the village and Fire Harbor during the finals of the exams," the outsider replied. "So I'm supposed to be on a training mission with my personal fleet during this time?" he asked, and Scarlet could only smile. "Yes, this will give him the ammunition he needs to take more power without our enemies even knowing, and weakening the Leaf Village in the process as well as the Land of Wind in the process. Let's have a few more drinks and then discuss things of the future." "Oh yes, let's. May the Father of Understanding guide us," the stranger said, grinning at his comrade in arms. After giving his comrade a round of applause, Scarlet uttered the words, "May the Father of Understanding guide us." After finishing their drinks, the two of them placed them on the table near a small document that read, "East India Trading Company," and a set of blood-red crosses. As they sailed to the Land of Fire, Naruto strolled along the deck of his ship, watching his crew members go about their tasks. Then, he heard his newest crew member moan, "Oh, suck it up, fish face. How much longer do I have to do this?" he asked, looking up at the man, who was as blue as the sea itself, with shark-like teeth and what appeared to be gills on his cheeks. "Gentlemen and ladies, how much longer does he have to do this?" Naruto then asked out loud while pulling a face and turning to face some of his crew. After giving the blue-skinned man a satisfied glance, the men and women working on fixing a portion of the ship's railing said, "We will be done in a couple of hours, sir." Naruto then turned back to face his sensei and newest crew member before grinning and saying, "Well, it looks like you'll be done once we reach the Land of Fire by this evening, Kisame." "You do know it was an accident, right?" Kisame said, feeling like he was groaning. "Tell that to my crew that has to fix the damage you did, fish face, and besides I warned you to watch where you point that sword of yours, and as we all know you didn't listen to me," he continued. The only explanation for the blue swordsman's departure was that it was an accident and he had no plans to repeat it. When Naruto arrived at the command deck above his quarters, he saw his cousin, one of the most feared swordsmen on board the Black Vixen, fighting back laughter at the scene in front of her. "Karen, if you're going to laugh, just get it over with already, he's embarrassed enough as it is." When she heard this, she couldn't contain her laughter any longer. After a minute or so, she stopped and turned to face the Faulkner, the sister ship of the Black Vixens, wondering about the other 7 swordsman members on board. "How do you think Zabuza is doing over there, cousin?" she asked. After taking out his spyglass, Naruto glanced at his sister's ship and simply grinned before stating, "A lot better than ours." The crew of the Faulkner watched in amazement as Tayuya, Isaribi, and Haku fought as a team against their new sensei Zabuza Momochi, who had just been reinstated as a member of the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist. After catching his breath and realizing that this team would need the most work, Zabuza gestured for them to stop. He then watched as the team took a much-needed break while he gazed out over the small fleet. Tayuya then locked up alongside him and said, "You look deep in thought, Zabuza?" After giving her a nod, he said, "I am. I was so concerned that this plan will not work at all, but I'm happy to see that I was wrong about that." She saw him nod his head and said, "That's good to hear, Sensei. Can I ask you another question? Do you know how to sail a ship? One of the requirements for being a good mist shinobi, especially one of the 7 swordsmen, is that you both know how to swim very well and how to sail a ship. Needless to say, I got very good at swimming at that part, and of course being a swordsman." He took a moment to think about the past. At the end, he said with a mixture of pride and disappointment, "But I unfortunately never got the some level of experience to be a good sailor, I am afraid. I know what I'm doing. I just don't have the necessary experience. I would like to be proficient at it." "Do you think we have a shot at passing the exam?" she had to ask after nodding to him. "I do. Just don't let your desire for revenge against both the snake and whoever was responsive for your mother's death cloud your judgment, my student," he replied to her. "Believe me, I know how you feel, since I had to watch so many of my friends with bloodlines are murdered by the 4th Mizkage. Even though I have planned for months, I was still unable to kill and had to flee, but what really makes me angry was find out later that she was nothing more than a puppet for someone to use just because what he held," Zabuza said in a somewhat distressed tone. Recalling what her tenant had told her, Tayuya was only able to nod her head before telling him, "Well, if their original plan was to try to take the 3-tailed turtle, they failed." "What do you mean? When Mamie and my brother fought him, we were able to defeat him and unfortunately led to his death. However, we resealed old 3 inside of me, so they won't be to get a hold of him 2.5 years from now," she told him. He simply grinned despite the bandages because he knew that the stranger with the red eye could not control an Uzumaki. Their only choice would be to take it away from her and her brother by force, which would be an extremely difficult procedure in the future. He had no sympathy for them. One tenant looked out and saw 8 ships off in the distance. He pulled out his spyglass and took a look, then ran to his commanding officer with a look of shock and possibly fear on his face. The Grand Fire Nation Navy Fleet Yard and Base, known as Phoenix Nest, was as calm as could be. They had already welcomed several foreign ships that were here for the Chunin exams into their harbors with absolutely no problems whatsoever. The young officer then rushed into the officers' lounge and yelled, "Sir, a group of water country warships have just entered the outer areas of the harbor," loud enough for everyone to hear. As the senior officers hurried to the upper observation areas of the fort, the young officer watched the room turn into a scene of action. He quickly took out his spyglasses and was shocked to see 5 frigates and 3 heavy warships that appeared capable of causing significant damage. After observing the ships, their weapons, and their nation of origin, one of the officers, known as a Master of Arms, said to his commanding officers, "Sir, I have never seen ships like these before. They have got to be packing at least 60 guns on just one broadside alone." The commander questioned, "Are you saying that they are even more armed than them, our men of war?" "These ships look like they have seen battles, sir, and yes, I do believe they are more armed than us. However, it is the 5 smaller ships that are of the frigate class I'm concerned with more." The commander questioned inquisitively, "What do you mean?" Seeing the shocked expressions on everyone's faces, the Master of Arms remarked, "I think they are the Pirate Lord vessels, sir, and I managed to see his name on one of them, sir. It's his ship, sir, it's the Black Vixen." When he saw that the ships were indicating the fort, one of the other officers, who had his spyglass trained on them, said, "Sir, they are signaling us." Startled by what he saw, the commanding officer swiftly took out his spyglass and gestured to the water country ships, saying, "I believe they are here for the Chunin exams." The Master of Arms read the message out loud for everyone to hear. "Phoenix Nest. We are the protection and diplomatic party representing the water daimyo of water country here to reopen trade negotiations with your land, as well as for our shinobi to compete in the current Chunin exams and request permission to negotiate. May we come ashore?" The senior officer asked, "Do we have an ambassador here?" before turning to one of his men. "Yes, sir, he is currently in the town." His officers immediately signaled back to the waterships and set to work getting everything ready for their arrival. He said, informed him to immediately come to the board as there will be diplomatic matters to be discussed and grant them permission to come ashore with full military honors as well. Together with a group of highly skilled water marines and the 2 ambassadors, who appeared to be as tough as they were presentable, May Jack and the water daimyo herself stepped off the long boat and entered the Phoenix Nest fort for the negotiations. They then entered a small, well-lit room where numerous Fire Nation sailors displayed their swords in observance. First of all, I would like to thank you for coming to our country and to compete in the exams, but I must ask out of curiosity, why do you choose to? And now, when you could have waited for another exam to occur later on, stated the ambassador for the Land of Fire, who had already been briefed on a number of factors, including the situation involving the Black Fox. The small group then went to a table and sat down, with May and Jack standing directly behind them in case of any trouble. The two water ambassadors and the water daimyo herself were actually quite experienced in the realm of negotiations and were not surprised by this question. That is actually quite simple, really. Your stadium as well as this time of year are perfect to host the exams and is considered one of the best times for any nation or village to compete in the exams, and despite just coming out of a war, we are still quite experienced in the shinobi areas, if you get my meaning. The ambassador from Fire inquired, so you have a team entering the exams? She simply smiled at him before responding, no, we have 2 teams entering the exams. It would have been 3, but since he felt they were not yet ready and wait for the next exams later this year, but we needed these 2 teams would not want to wait as they are quite experienced and should have received a field promotion, but this was much more efficient and would promote more interaction with foreign ninja. Very well, I see no reason they can't not eat. However, what do you mean by opening trade negotiations? Asked the Fire ambassador, who was taken aback by the statement but persisted in believing that it might benefit their own nation as well. I mean just that, as you know, the Land of Water is made up of many different islands, both he and snow, and our economy has recently begun to boom and we are in need of customers sell our wares to. We would also like to open trade with other nations for some of their exotic materials and things, and knowing how many people come through your land, we are hoping that you would allow us to set up a trading post here. In fact, I have already sent someone had to buy the very large plot of land to act as our trading and export embassy for our many businesses and jobs until they can purchase land and ports as well. The water daimyo told them with an unambiguous goal into which they had previously pondered and had a lot of fun their responses. In an attempt to gain a position he could utilize later, the Fire ambassador stated, well, if you wish to build your embassy on those lands that you have already purchased, there is nothing we can do to stop you, but would also like to know if we can help in any way? One of the water ambassadors then said, not at this time, sir. We have brought plenty of supplies to begin building both the embassy and the ports necessary for our livelihood, but we thank you for the offer. The 2 water ambassadors and their daimyo exchanged glances before turning back to the Fire messenger. This surprised the Fire ambassador a little, but he continued on to the next topic he knew needed to be covered. Very well, I can understand that. However, as one area of expertise, I would like to discuss with you about a particular individual. I know that you are referring to Captain Naruto Uzumaki. What matters do you wish to discuss with him? The Fire ambassador stated, we would like to try to persuade him to come back home here in the Land of Fire. Jack looked away and then muttered something to get the Fire ambassador's attention. I was unaware that this matter would be any of your concern, sir? The ambassador asked. My name is Captain Jack Webb, sir, Pirate Lord of the Water Seas and a good friend to Captain Uzumaki. I was unaware that a pirate lord like yourself would even be in her services, sir. The Fire ambassador then turned to face the water daimyo. I would be very careful about your next words if I were your ambassador, the water daimyo said, cutting off the Fire ambassador with a chilly glance. Captain Webb has recently been reinstated as a water country officer in our meeting and will silk team to hold his position as a mariner lord, or as you call them, pirate lords. And we will remember that, my lady. However, we must have an opportunity to speak with Lord Uzumaki. The investor immediately shifted the topic back to Uzumaki after the ambassador and the Fire officers sensed the coldness and abrasiveness in her voice and realized that the pirate lords were a sensitive topic with them. She caught his reaction when she told him that things had not gone as planned for them and that these talks would continue for a while. It is not my decision if he will talk with you, but his own. And just to let you know, he is also a mariner lord as well and has diplomatic immunity thanks to his years of service to the rebellion and the new water country government. Naruto, Tayuya and the senseis watched as the water daimyo and her escort party returned to the water nation ships nearly an hour later with the news of the negotiations. Well, you two, I have some good news, she said as she approached them. And what would that news be? Naruto then asked, and the two of them gave her a curious look. The water daimyo handed them their papers and then decided to go into further detail about her negotiation. First off, the Chunin exams will begin tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. at the village's Shinobi Academy. Now, here are your headbands and the papers to dissipate in the exams. Please sign them and have your teammates sign theirs as well. Then, present them when you enter the exam at the front of the academy, she said. The 2 embassies have been agreed upon, so we will need to unpack all the cargo from the ships to begin construction on the harbor embassy first, the water daimyo said to the two Uzumakis while perched on one of the ship's railings. But allow me to tell you two of the fire government's wishes first. Naruto simply had to ask, what do they want, since he could only speculate as to what this was about. They want you to return to the Leaf Village, however they are unaware of you to Yuya. Once we enter the exam, it will be nearly impossible to keep this quiet. We will deal with them when the time comes, but I would recommend getting the shinobi ambassador and the embassy constructed as soon as possible to prepare for the fallout, Naruto said after glancing at his sister and grinning devilishly. I agree, we'll do with it when it comes, but for the moment we should get back to our ships and get everything ready for tomorrow, Yuya said after nodding to her brother. As everyone nodded and went about their daily lives to get ready for the next day, Naruto said, it would be a 40-minute journey to the village if we walk by foot, so I recommend we go before sunrise. 2 hours before sunrise, the crews of the Water Nation ships were still working to unload the cargo for the embassy's construction, and the sea air was cool and pleasant on the morning of the Chunin exams. Inside his cabin, Naruto was busy getting ready for the exam this morning, but he couldn't stop thinking about what would happen today when he heard a knock at the door. He opened it to see his first mate Suigetsu and cousin Karen enter, and he immediately noticed him putting the finishing touches on his gear and outfit. I hope you two are prepared for this, he said, turning to face them. Yeah, I'm outfitted for an entire week. Why may I ask you had us do this? Karen said, nodding her head. Because if they have not changed too much of the exam, then second part will take place in the Forest of Death and should take up to about 5 days to complete, he stated to them. When Suigetsu saw his captain approaching, he signaled for them to follow him out of the cabin and onto the main desk, saying, she will be here when you get back, Naruto. Suigetsu couldn't wait to demonstrate his abilities against other shinobi. With a nod toward them, he touched the rail lightly before putting his hood back up and approaching their sensei, who was relieved to be off the Black Vixen doing manual labor. Kisame then positioned himself to walk down the side of the ship into the longboat, his students right behind him. Although Kisame had trained all 3 of them at one point or another without his former organization knowing about it and had given the rebellion bits of information to use against the renegade water government, he would not voluntarily admit to anyone that he was actually afraid of the Black Fox after unintentionally seeing the man's cousin and sister in the bathhouse that one time. He turned to face the 3 of them as if longboat had been moving silently through the early morning with another longboat carrying 4 people on board, heading towards the beach to start their journey to the Hidden Leaf. The human shark, as some have dubbed him, was still having nightmares about that day. When 8 people approached the gate and handed out papers for the Chunin exams, the 2 Chunin, who had arrived early for their shift at the guard gate, couldn't help but think that today would be one of those dull days. They were friends. Even though the 2 senses were part of the 7 swordsmen of the mist, this was not unusual in and of itself. However, the fact that Zabuza and Kisame entered their village on their way to the academy startled them to the point of asking, did you just see that? Even the Anbu in hiding could not help but stare in shock at the group that had just entered the village and stare at each other, wondering what was going to happen and how bloody this year's exam would actually be. His friend could only nod in shock as he watched the mist group move deeper into the village. The 2 teams first went to the Silver Leaf Hotel, where all of the foreign dignitaries and exam competitors would be staying during the Chunin exams. Once they had secured their rooms, they ran to the Shinobi Academy and climbed the tree that provided them with a great view of the teams entering the exams. Together with his sisters, Naruto watched as numerous groups entered, but it was when the Sand team arrived that he sensed something was amiss. In particular, as he glanced at an old friend and swiftly used his eagle vision to glance at the back of her neck and utter a brief curse, his sister installed the device and asked, what is it? He faced her and said, it's Gara sis. She has a personality seal on the back of her neck that is making her act like a homicidal maniac again, and I can tell from the crude work that it's the snake freaks. Not yet, you 4, I know how much you want to kill him, but just went okay. Yuya cursed lightly because she did not want their potential enemies to find out. They had seen a lot of potential problems come and go, but they had also seen 2 teams that were known as the Rookie 9 recognize one of them from Wave Country. A little while later, they saw the Sound team enter the academy, and right behind them was none other than the Snake's own master spy Kabuto. His team had to forcibly stop several team members from going to kill him due to previous encounters. The 4 of them merely nodded, but they were itching to tear him to pieces for what he had done to them and Orochimaru. 2 more teams then entered the building, one of which included a strange young man wearing green spandex. Since it was almost time for the exam to start, their senseis made the decision to go inside and wait for them. The 3 Black Vixen crew members saw that the other team from the Wave mission had also entered the building and thought it might be a good time to do the same. As they enter the building, Metallics, for whom the bell tolls, begins to play in the background. While Tenten Neji and his teammates were preparing to enter the exam room, they were stopped in their tracks when they noticed the mist teams passing by. Tenten was shocked to see the person she had been seeing for so long. "Geisa, that's him. Who are you talking about?" Neji asked, glancing at her. She told them, "That guy who just walked by is Naruto Uzumaki, also known as the Pirate Lord the Black Fox." But they both stared at him with a mix of excitement and fear at the prospect of dealing with someone of his caliber. As Guy and his team approached the examination room, they saw the fox quickly raise his foot and slam it against the door, sending it flying into the room. Everyone was furious at the person who had just done that, but then a pale white figure appeared in the doorway, slowly entering as if he owned the place. Sasuke had just asked Kabuto for information on both Rock Lee and Gaara of the desert when the classroom door abruptly flew open, almost striking several of the Chunin hopefuls. This is where the song ends. When they looked over, Sasuke and Kabuto saw one of the most infamous individuals in all of the elemental nations standing in front of them. Sasuke immediately turned back to Kabuto and demanded to know everything there was to know about the Black Fox, saying, "All right, let me see if I've got something here then. Oh, here it is." Since almost everyone in the room was now focusing on the ninja information card, Kabuto became extremely alarmed when he turned to face the wall where the door had stopped and discovered that it had been embedded there by the force of the kick alone. Naruto Uzumaki is his name. Clan Heir status. The Black Fox, also known as Pirate Lord known jutsus, currently unidentified. The 7 swordsmen of the Mist are credited with training him in known swordsman skills. Shinobi from a TS rank Mariner Lord and SS rank Sailor. Is a Water Country war veteran who is known to have fought with Mei Terumi during the 4th Mizkage. The sight of this type of information about an exam competitor startled everyone in the room. When Sasuke first saw them, he was both surprised and delighted because it meant he might be able to learn the Black Fox's fighting technique and weapons. However, the exam proctor appeared before he could even demand anything from the Black Fox. Currently, Kakashi was waiting for updates on his students in the teacher's lounge when he noticed the faces of 2 of the 7 mist swordsmen standing there sipping coffee as if nothing was wrong and asking, "So do you think they're both going to succeed?" After taking a sip, Kisame remarked, "Yep, I mean, we trained for crying out loud Zabuza." Good point. I wonder how long it's going to take for them to figure out. He's in the exam? Kisame asked with a smile. Let's just wait and see. A young Chunin entered the room to announce that the next section of the exam was about to start, but he also made the announcement, "Oh, just to let everyone know, the Black Fox is representing the Hidden Mist." The Leaf Ninjas were all curious about what they had been discussing and had completely forgotten about that moment. The 2 swordsmen simply made a posting motion with their coffee mugs and beaming broadly, and every other exigency in the room simply stared at them. Both Naruto and Tayuya had already assigned codenames to their teams. Her team was called Red, and his team was just called Black. As Naruto approached him and used his more dangerous voice, the same one he used the day he killed Gadoa, he said, "You should think twice about walking up on us. Men have been killed for less." Sasuke saw an opportunity to try to get the hidden blades from the pirates. But Tayuya gave him a powerful kick to his reproductive organs before revealing her own hidden blades and placing them at his throat. He was able to stand up after Tayuya took her hidden blade away from his throat, but he chose to remain conceited and make demands of people he should know better than to do so, saying, "You will give me those hidden blades." Then Naruto said, "Is that so?" with a little laugh. "Yes. And how would you know about these weapons, if I might ask?" "Because her father said he would make me a pair of them if I got him the designs," Sasuke said, gesturing to Tenten, "but I think I want your more." "Sorry, but that's not happening on either front, and I'm going to have a little talk with her father later," Naruto said, laughing at him. Tenten asked, "Do you remember me, Naruto?" as she approached him in surprise. He looked her in the eyes and said, "It's been a long time, old friend, but I am going to have to talk to your father about certain things." His voice and demeanor changed. She nodded and was pleased to see that he still thought of her as a friend. He then saw that the Uchiha's pink haired teammate was looking at him angrily, but there was nothing she could do because their proctor had come to begin the next section of the test in the Forest of Death. Sitting quietly in his office, the third Hokage completed the paperwork he dreaded the most. A young Chunin rushed into the office, bowed to his superior, and said, "Lord Hokage, the Black Fox is currently here in the village, sir, and is currently competing in the Chunin exams for the Hidden Mist Village." He secretly hoped that something would stop this hell on earth for him, and let's say that his wish was granted despite the type of paperwork it would cause later. When he realized how bad things were going to get for him, the old Hokage could only mutter, "Shit." Anko laughed as she approached the group of prospective Chunins, eager to see what they were really capable of. However, before she could say anything, an Anbu appeared next to her and whispered something in her ear. As they waited for the next section of the exam to start, Naruto and Tayuya's mist teams, Black and Red, noticed that this scene was about them and laughed a little. They then noticed that Anko had returned to the group holding what appeared to be papers, and he said, "All right, kids, before we can begin this next fun part of the exam in what I like to call my playground, but to others it is simply known as Training Ground 44 or the Forest of Death. Now for all of you to continue you'll have to sign these waivers that state that if you, let's say die. The Hidden Leaf is not responsible in any way, shape or form, so if you wish to continue please sign right here," she said, observing the gathered group chatting among themselves. As their proctor explained the next section of the test, the Chunins who were helping her started giving out waivers to each team. "Now here are the rules, kiddies. This exam is a survival test that will take up to 5 days of your life in my little playground," the proctor said. 5 days. What are we supposed to do about food? Ino's larger teammate said after she was genuinely shocked to hear this. At Choji's antics, Shikamaru could only shake his head and mutter, "Troublesome." Well, it is a survival exercise, remember, and it's a forest too, so when you think about it, food is everywhere, but at the same time you all might be food to the creatures living in here as well, Anko said, laughing at the antics of one of her friend's sons. What kind of animals? Was the only question that one group of optimistic Chunin needed to ask. She smiled maniacally at them. All things like giant killer insects, poisonous plants that are also carnivorous, and of course my personal favorite. The big bad tigers that love to use our bones like a toothpick. Once more, the conversation started off quickly as they discussed this new information, but before they could go any further, she added, "But that's not all, kiddies, each of you will also be given one of these 2 scrolls here." As she explained, you'll need both a heaven and an earth scroll to proceed to the next part of the exam, so you'll have to take one from one of the other teams. Oh, and by the way, don't open them. Everyone stared at the scrolls before turning to face her. "What happens if we open them?" inquired one of the hopefuls. Anko simply smiled at him and replied, "Why spoil the surprise? Now to pass, as I said, you need both scrolls and all of your teammates still alive, and then get to the tower at the center of the training ground within the 5 days time limit that have been allotted to you, and you move on, otherwise you fail." She said, "Now my fellow shinobi here will escort each of you to an individual gate where you can begin this next part of the exam. I'll just one more piece of advice for you all. Try not to die." As everyone stared at her in disbelief and a little worry after realizing that only half of them would advance to the next section of the test. Many of the Fire Navy's top officers were now standing on the observation deck of the Phoenix Nest Naval Station, watching the small Water Nation fleet that had anchored in their harbor a short distance away. One of the captains was examining each ship's armament and design. "Have you been able to identify them?" the lead admiral asked the captain after turning to face him regarding the water fleet. "To be honest, sir, I have never seen any of these ships before, however it's the 5 in the middle that worries me the most, sir," the captain responded. The admiral asked, "What do you mean?" after becoming quite interested in the statements. The captain continued to assess the situation. "From what I can tell, sir, the 3 big ones are clearly man of wars that make even ours look weak in comparison. Even their names are appropriate for them." Then another spyglass wielding captain started naming the ships. Great White is the name of the first ship, White Tip is the name of the second, and Thresher is the name of the third. "They're all named after sharks. It fits the tradition of the Water Navy, but what about the other 5? Replied the admiral. One of the officers pointed a much more powerful telescope at a black ship with black sails after looking straight into it to get a good view of them. His eyes widened as soon as he looked through it, both in shock and in recognition of the Black Vixen, the political nightmare that had just descended upon him. So I take the rest are? According to another officer, yes sir, they are. The admiral asked them, what is your assessment? Those 5 are for all heavy frigates, sir, the captain said after taking another look. The Vixen is of a design I've never seen before in person. This statement startled one of the captains, who said, I thought you seen every vessel that floats? I've seen most of them, but there are exceptions. However, some of its characteristics remind me of whirlpool vessels before they're full. He then addressed them all. Everyone's attention was drawn to his next statement. There is also another ship looks exactly like the Black Vixen. I think it's another ship of the same class of vessel. When he asked, how dangerous do you think they all are? The admiral's interest was aroused. They will not be a danger to us unless we provoke them first, the young captain stated sternly after surveying the area where the ships were located. But those 3 ships from the land of rice might be a different story, not just to us but to them as well. Why would that be? The admiral asked, intrigued by this statement. Because sir, they were the ones helping with the bloodline war. Keep an eye on all of them. I want to know what they're up to at all times. The admiral looked back and realized that something would need to be done going forward because he did not trust the old water navy, which had killed a lot of innocent people in its time. Yes sir. Suigetsu, Karen, and Naruto were escorted to their gate and given their exam scroll by an ANBU. As soon as the Anbu left them, Suigetsu looked at the scroll and said to his friends, looks like they gave us an Earth scroll. So what's the first thing we do once we are in there? Karen asked, and the 2 Uzumakis nodded their heads before turning back to face the gate. We look for the scroll we need and I have an idea on how to get it, Naruto said after surveying the forest. The gate flew open and the 3 of them hurried in as quickly as they could, knowing that they had a destination in mind to carry out their plan. The 2 of them simply nodded, knowing that his ideas typically worked better than he had anticipated. After examining the scroll, Haku told her teammates, it's an Earth scroll, this means we gotta find Heaven one, right? Tayuya and her teammates realized that this small piece of paper could decide their fate and that they needed to find its companion in order to pass this section of the exam. No, you think, really, Tayuya remarked cynically. Knowing that they had a lot of work ahead of them, Inari could only roll her eyes at her friend's antics as the gate suddenly flew open and the 3 of them entered. The council was trying to come up with a plan to keep Naruto Uzumaki in the village at all costs, and the 3rd Hokage could just help with the headache that was about to happen. The Shinobi Council finally had enough and voiced their opinion, saying, are you out of your minds? He has diplomatic immunity from the Land of Water as one of their shinobi and is currently competing in the Chunin exams and cannot be touched by anyone here? The civilians, however, were never one to anticipate the future or the repercussions that such decisions would bring. We cannot allow the 4th Hokage's heir to elude us once more. He must be present in the village where we can provide protection, said a foolish council member. When he heard this, one of the shinobi sneered and said in a chilly tone, oh yeah, this village did a real good job protecting his mother from harm, and he will not believe a single word any of you say or as for that matter. Why would you say that? Inquired the civilian. Another shinobi followed by saying, if you are trying to get him to marry your daughter so you can have access to his funds and so forth, I would forget about it right now if I were you. Either way, we must talk with him. I suggest that we request a meeting with him as soon as the Forest of Death part of the exam is done, said a rather savage looking female shinobi, speaking loudly for everyone to hear. They all started to agree with her that, in this type of situation, things needed to be handled carefully. Karen, how many teams are around us at this moment? Naruto asked his cousin after the 3 pirates had been in the Forest of Death for only 20 minutes. They were now walking through the dense foliage with a keen sense of curiosity and caution. Quite a few, cousin. They're not making any moves towards. I don't think they know we're here, she said with a smile after expanding her senses and feeling the surroundings. Then he grinned and started singing, now we are ready to head for the horn, loud enough for everyone to hear. They both recognized what he was doing at once and started singing Randy Dandy Oh, way, I, rollin', go, is another. Our boots and our clothes boys are all in the pond. Tim Rollick and Randy Dandy Oh. Since seeing the Black Fox in the exam room, Ino had been interested in him. He listened carefully to Sakura's accounts of their journey to Wave Country and hoped to see him and his teammates in action. As they passed the area, they all heard 3 people singing and moved to the center of the commotion. Heave a paw, heave away. Following Ino through the brush, Shikamaru and Choji were now quite intrigued and a little scared. Eventually, they used a thick bush as cover and a watch. Way, I, rollin', go. The anchors on board and the cables all stored, Tim Rollickin' Randy Dandy-o. Shikamaru noticed the confused expressions on their faces as Choji tried to figure out what kind of song they were singing and why they were singing so loudly. He said, "It's called a sea shanty, and it's a song used by sailors to help keep the crew's spirits up and to help them when they work. And they're bringing people in to take their scroll. We'll be bending her out through the hair shortly. Roll and go, way, I." When the song's next line started, where the pretty young gals all come down in their flocks, Tim Rollickin' Randy Dandy-o. Many more people were hiding, listening to the song, and waiting for their opportunity to attack without realizing that they would be signing their death warrants. Oh, heave away, way, I, roll and go, heave a Paul. As one of her subordinates rushed up to her with a worried expression, Anko and her fellow shinobi were only able to hear the song. "We have a big problem." Since he knew his teammates would join him shortly after, Naruto sang the next line. "Come breast the bars, bullies, and heave her away. Soon we'll be rollin' her way down the bay. Heave a Paul, oh, heave away, way, I, rollin', go." The anchors on board and the cables all stored, Tim Rollickin' Randy Dandy-o. When a group of rain shinobi appeared in a tree above them as soon as they finished singing, Naruto smiled evilly and strode forward before yelling, "Looky here boys, it's some lost birds that never learned to fly." The Comets were well aware that he would say such a thing, but what really caught their attention was when he appeared to swing his sword out of its scabbard at that precise moment, destroying the tree they had just been standing on. At first, they believed he was insane or delusional, but then they felt the wind pick up around him and realized he had sent a powerful wind jutsu at them. When they saw that this was the same man who had claimed to be the Black Fox, the other two members of his team also immediately took their swords from their sides, and they were unable to conceal the shocked expression on their faces. They were able to move out of the way just seconds before the large branches hit the ground where they had just been standing, but they heard sounds of things crashing and breaking behind them before they could even move against Team Black. They turned around just in time to see large sections of the trees coming down upon them. When the three rain ninjas saw how much damage could be done with a single swing of the black sword, they were taken aback. They were also a little taken aback because they had never seen weapons like this before. The other male team member had a strangely shaped blade that appeared to have sections made of shark teeth that reflected light off of them, and he wore sharp shark-like teeth, just like the seven swordsmen of the mist. Their fears were heightened when the young redhead girl brandished a nearly straight blade with odd sections built into it. In an instant, the blade transformed into a whip-like weapon. As Naruto approached the group leader and said, "Tell me, little rain ninja, do you fear death?" the three rain ninjas became extremely alarmed. Naruto then smiled darkly and said again, "So you do fear death? Alright then, just hand over the scroll and they shall let you go. After all, there are plenty of days remaining in this exam for you to acquire the scrolls you need. So what will it be?" The young man was so terrified that he was unable to even speak to them. "Don't give him the scroll," cried one of the other rain ninjas. "Remember boy, we are S-rank level shinobi and pirates, and as you know S-rank usually means is the money really worth your life?" Karen said, gripping the blade firmly, before any of the others could respond. The strange whip-like sword had just wrapped around the young man who had just spoken out. "What will the decision be boy?" Naruto asked, holding out his hand for the scroll. When Karen released the other rain shinobi, who also started running deep into the forest after his comrades, the lead ninja gave the scroll to Naruto and started to back off. Team Black then grinned at the scroll, realizing that it was exactly what they needed, saying, "Now that was a bit easier than I thought it would be." "So what's the next move, Captain?" Suigetsu asked, grinning at their good fortune. The three of them started to move farther into the woods and eventually vanished from view after saying, "We head to the tower as soon as possible. Keep an eye out for any more danger." As they watched the three pirate ninjas vanish into the woods, Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji were at a loss for words. "You guys saw that, right?" they asked. When Choji said, "That was so unreal, how are they even competing in this exam?" they were only able to nod to her. Shikamaru had an idea and came forward, From what information we heard before in the classroom, they are all highly dangerous shinobi, but because of the civil war in the Land of Water at the time, they were unable to be promoted, so while they may actually be at a Jonin's level, they are actually still ranked as Genin. Ino asked, so instead of getting a field promotion they're here competing in the exam? As they all realized how risky this particular exam was going to be, Shikamaru nodded his head. Team Red of the Hidden Mist Village, under the leadership of Tayuya, kept walking through the forest while occasionally hearing the sounds of battle in the distance. "Hey sis, how are you doing?" her communicator asked as it suddenly came to life. Then, while her teammates were listening, she said into the communicator, "We are doing well brother, but haven't found another team yet. Keep your senses open, as I suspect it won't be long until someone tries to come after you guys. We already have our scroll, so we're on our way to assist you." He was speaking over the phone. "All right, we will meet up with you soon. Keep your eyes open until we meet up," she replied, simply rolling her eyes and nodding her head. "Got it sis, be careful." They started to move through the area, keeping their eyes and ears open. As soon as she said, "We will be." The lead ninja then advanced with a blade in his hand and a smug expression on his face after realizing that it was the somewhat less dangerous group of mist shinobi. As soon as they entered the clearing, they noticed a group of earth ninjas waiting for them with extremely evil expressions on their faces. As they approached the group of young men who were too inexperienced for their own good, the three females could only chuckle a little. The lead shinobi then said, "You know, if you girls don't want to die, just hand over your scroll to us." Tayuya, who was unable to control herself, said, "Are you guys like comedians or something? Because if you think that is enough to make us give up this scroll, you got another thing coming. Like your death." The three of them turned to one another and began laughing aloud for everyone to hear. The three of them got so angry that they fell straight into the trap set by the three girls. Haku instantly materialized a number of her ice needles and threw them into one of the girls' necks, with what appeared to be a seal tag attached to the ends, which sizzled and eventually exploded. The last member of the Earth team was so taken aback by their abilities that he initially failed to notice Tayuya's blade piercing his heart. Isaribi then produced two swords made of pure water, which then sliced through the middle section of her opponent, completely surprising the other two. As she withdrew the sword from his chest, he glanced down at his wound and said, that's not funny one. Bit, in a startled tone. The three of them started looking for their scroll right away after witnessing his body fall forward violently and then roll over on his back, exposing his shocked face. They discovered another Earth scroll. Then, what do we do now? Haku inquired. As she started to move farther into the forest, Tayuya told them, we take it with us. It might prove useful in the future. After a while of walking through the forest, the three of them encountered Team Black, who approached them. Curious, Naruto asked, were you able to acquire any scrolls? We got one, but it's the same one we already had before, so out of curiosity, what do we do now? Tayuya asked, holding up both of her Earth scrolls. Naruto immediately recognized that this could present an opportunity for his sister's team when he heard distant sounds of combat before he could even speak. Well, that sound could be opportunity knocking, he asked. She followed her brother and his group toward the sounds of combat, saying sarcastically, yeah, with a cannon. Sasuke still found it hard to believe that the strange grass ninja they had met was actually Orochimaru, the renegade Sannin. The snake Sannin had turned out to be more dangerous than they had thought, taking the team apart with ease and playing with them the entire time. He quickly put on a smile, made a number of hand gestures, and shot out of his neck in an odd way. He then bit down on the neck of the last devoted Uchiha, causing an unprecedented wave of pain throughout his body. His other two teammates were trying to help him fight the Sannin, but they had only proved to be a minor annoyance to the man. His teammate Sakura was already by his side tending to the wound when the offending serpent, like man, left his upper body. However, both of them, along with their third teammate, looked up in disbelief to see the heaven scroll they had been given at the start of the exam in the hands of the renegade Sannin, only to watch it torn from his grasp by an oddly bladed whip. They all turned to see Red and Team Black standing on a nearby tree, watching them all predatorily. Karen smiled and eventually caught the scroll without even trying to look at it. Found one, but what do we do about him? She said. The snake Sannin was furious because he knew exactly who they were. He had seen them at the Forest of Death's entrance earlier, and he had secretly hoped that he wouldn't encounter them in the exam room because he knew that in order to stay hidden from the village's Anbu, he needed to maintain a certain level of power. The snake Sanin noticed the look that Naruto and Tayuya exchanged and felt all the hairs on his body stand on end as the two siblings turned back to face him with sly smiles and a sad expression on their faces. "Kill him," he said. They all drew several handguns at that precise moment, aimed them at the snake Sanin's head, and smiled simply as they pulled the triggers, launching the projectiles at their target. If it weren't for Orochimaru's years of experience, he would have been killed immediately. The renegade Sanin ran as fast as he could, dodging projectiles every second, only to realize that a few of the shinobi pirates had vanished from sight. He narrowly avoided having his head severed by a swing from the Black Fox's blade, known as the Maelstrom. The blade only missed his neck by a few centimeters, and thanks to its wind affinity, just one of the special powers of the blade, it cut through a tree trunk like a hot knife through butter. The snake jumped to a different branch, barely catching a glimpse of the fox aiming another pistol at his head. The snake swiftly changed course, only to be startled by what seemed to be a massive monster of some sort attempting to crush him with its enormous fist. As if that weren't enough, he then noticed the young girl wearing odd wraps around her body. She swiftly raised what appeared to be a hybrid cannon shotgun, and when she pulled the trigger, a large amount of lead shot was directed at its target. This time, however, it was much more difficult for him to dodge because there were 3 opponents. To the surprise of many, including Team 7, he appeared to almost create a new body right out of his mouth as the bullet smashed into him, tearing apart most of his back in the process. Even the slime and drool that came off him left an empty husk behind, similar to how a snake sheds its skin. Now, Sakura and her teammates were completely engrossed in the action and even a little repulsed by what the snake Sanin had just done. She then saw the red-headed girl with the glasses appear to hurl her odd whip-like blade at him, but the Sanin managed to avoid her blow. She then literally threw herself to a higher branch and pointed at her blade. In a split second, she moved her blade, severing another branch with a whip-like motion and sending it hurtling toward the recuperating Sanin, who managed to dodge just in time. Orochimaru swiftly replaced himself with a mud clone and fled in the hopes that everything would turn out okay, because he knew that if this battle went on, the Anbu would find him and his plans would be destroyed. After swiftly eliminating the final clone and being shocked by how easily he had escaped, the teams immediately regrouped and assessed Team 7's situation. The Black Fox approached Sasuke and said, "I know that look, boy, he put that particular seal on your neck. What I'm about to do, boy, will help you despite how it might not seem at first." Sasuke was in so much pain that he was barely able to stay conscious at the moment. He then swiftly gave the young Uchiha a single blow to the head, which infuriated the pink-haired girl until she saw the gun's muzzle in her face and heard him say, "I know what I'm doing, girl. If he had remained awake, he might die in time. At least now he has a 50.50 chance of survival." Before she could even utter a word, he added, "Be happy that we are even giving you a scroll girl. That heaven scroll girl is our compensation for helping you out at all. Be thinking us. And one more piece of advice." She was genuinely shocked by his remark, but she watched as he swiftly grabbed the earth scroll from his sister and threw it at them. "Make sure that one-eye sensei of yours gets that thing sealed up as soon as possible," he said, drawing their attention. After saying that, they vanished into the forest, leaving Team 7 behind. They had a different scroll than they had initially used, but it was still a scroll. After telling their former sensei, who had met them there when they arrived, Team 7 had finally reached the Forest of Death's central tower by the 4th day of the Chunin exam. After telling him what had happened to them in the forest, they were immediately taken before the 3rd Hokage, who listened carefully to their explanations of what had happened to them. Even though the old village leader was upset that his former student, Orochimaru, had returned and attacked a number of his young shinobi in the field, he was even more shocked by what they told him about the 2 mist teams, Red and Black. The 3rd Hokage heard the stories of Sakura and young Ino, who related all they could recall of their experiences with Mist's team block and the Snake Sanin. The 2 young girls' accounts of Naruto and his fellow shinobi pirates' true strength were shocking. The Jonin at the time found it hard to believe what they were hearing, but they had all visited the battlefield to witness it for themselves and were in complete awe of what they saw. Asuma then said aloud for everyone to hear, "Your former student dad has made quite a powerful enemy, if you ask me." The assembled Jonin were at a loss for words regarding the pirates and Orochimaru's abilities, as he would not be aware that all power had turned out to be quite unnatural in every way to everyone in the room. Enko continued, I would have really liked to have seen that battle. I mean, my former sensei got his ass kicked by a group of badass pirates. I love it," to which the other Jonin in the room could only nod their heads in agreement. Everyone in the room chuckled a little at her remarks, but they were also taken aback by young Sakura's description of the Snake Sanin's newfound fighting skills. They all started to wonder if it was really possible to kill him at this point. If he was compelled to escape in the first place, they speculate that it was feasible but extremely difficult. "Lord Third, with your former student now here, what should we do now? Should we cancel the exam?" inquired an older Jonin. Anko gave a disapproving shake of her head before saying aloud, "No, that would not be a good idea." The third asked her, "Why?" as she watched everyone in the room try to piece together the puzzle that was the Snake Sanin and his actions and motivations. She said honestly, "He stated that if we cancel the exam he would destroy the village and kill everyone here in the village. I don't know what he's planning, but the power he displayed even at a reduced level was more than enough to keep me guessing and on my toes. Whatever he's up to, Lord Third, it's not good." But then another Jonin asked, "Well, that's all good, but what about the Black Fox?" regarding Naruto and the other Mist teams. The third Hokage went on to say, "Leave him and the Mist teams alone for the time being. I don't want to create an international incident by provoking him or anyone else." All of the gathered Jonin nodded their heads and returned to their tasks, considering what might occur next. On a pillar, Naruto and Tayuya watched their fellow host with great interest, wondering what would happen in a day or so. When the time came for the preliminary fight, they were able to see the seal on their sacrificed brethren and were furious because they knew how careless Orochimaru had been. The two siblings knew they had to wait for the right time to come when the mental strain would cause Gaara's seal to deteriorate significantly, making it very easy to break even in the heat of battle. They had to control their urges to go out and find the Snake Sanin, tear him a new one, and apply a seal on him as punishment. Because of their abilities as assassins, Karen and her cousins appeared at this precise moment, and they were a little worried because they knew how difficult it would be to save the female Send user. They watched her enter her room without realizing anyone was watching her at the time. "One of us has to face her, and no matter what, if we don't take out that seal she could continue to become unstable to everyone," Tayuya said after she entered her room. The three of them then descended to the floor and strolled around, observing the worried expressions on the faces of many of the other competitors who were already scheduled to take the exam. Karen nodded her head before saying, "It will have to be one of you two that is going to have to fight her. I'm good but not that good, and as time goes on she will just become more and more dangerous to everyone around her. We'll worry about it tomorrow, when this part of the exam is over, and no matter what we are going to have to fight, be prepared," Naruto said as he paused in front of his room and turned to face them. After saying this, he opened the door to his room and turned to see his sister and cousin heading to their rooms, nodding at him in understanding as they did so. When he got inside, though, he was startled to see Tenten herself standing there, staring at him with a slightly worried expression on her face. "You've proven to be a very hard man to track down at times, Naruto. Why didn't you tell me you for the Black Fox?" she asked, stepping forward as soon as the door was closed, giving him a firm embrace before planting a passionate kiss on his lips. "You were safer not knowing at the time, Ten, which also brings up another question," he said, looking at her sorrowfully. "And what would that be? Why does the Uchiha think that he can get a set of hidden blades from your family?" She wasn't too taken aback by this assertion. "Believe it or not, we were not the first people he's gone to looking for a set. Luckily my father did say that the only way he could even make a set of them was if he had the blueprints, and I doubt that there were any of those nearby. More than you know, however, from what I remember about you, Tenten, which has also made me come to really like you as well as that simply you want a set of your... Or am I wrong?" Naruto said, grinning and letting her in a little. "Yes, I would like a pair of my own, Naruto, but I also have to ask you what the hell is going on," she said, unable to contain her laughter. In the cafeteria, Haku and Isaribi were currently eating some food and listening to their rivals' conversations as they recalled the lessons they had learned from both their syntheses and their captains, who were all alleged members of the Assassin Brotherhood. At the time, the main topics of conversation were who they would have to fight and what would happen next. Fortunately, most people still considered Team Red of the Hidden Mist to be the weaker team, but some were being too cautious because they had advanced to this section of the test. One of their hopes was that everyone was still underestimating that they would be the easiest team to defeat, knowing that they could take advantage of this. After that, they heard the girl with the pink and blonde hair discussing some of the events that had occurred, saying, "I'm telling you, Ino. Those two hidden mist teams are something to be absolutely afraid of. They tore that Orochimaru guy apart like it was nothing. Even though some things had gotten in the way, Ino told her longtime friend, "Oh come on forehead, I saw them in action as well. The rain ninjas never even stood a chance, and that's not all, they let them live, even got a heaven scroll out of it." It was nice to be reuniting with her friend. Sakura told her friend, recalling the agony and frustration they endured. "Wait a minute, they had an opportunity to kill those rain ninjas that we encountered. That was one annoying battle to get a scroll from them. I definitely looks like those guys knew what they were doing if you were having serious problems with them. But wait a minute, did you say the name Orochimaru? Yeah, he came after our team and tore us apart like it was nothing at all. Well, that was until the pirates showed up and basically went all out on him. Why do you ask, pig?" After hearing her longtime friend say, "Sakura, Orochimaru is on the same level as the Hokage. You guys went up against a cage-level opponent and survived to tell the tale," Ino was completely taken aback. "You mean he's that much of a danger?" The two girls then started to scan the room, noting how many higher-ranked shinobi were present with them. "He's got his own section in the bingo book, for crying out loud, Sakura. You see how many Jonin and Anbu are here? It's all because of him, I'm sure of it." Seeing all of the higher-ranked shinobi moving around the room, Sakura remarked, "All of this is because of him. I'm still trying to come to grips with what happened out there. You do realize though that all three of you got to see those pirates in action. Do you know how many people here want to see what they are really capable of?" Ino asked, setting down her trinket and looking her old friend in the eyes. Inquiring about her old friend's knowledge of these pirates, Sakura said, "You sure seem to know a lot about them, Ino." "All I know is what my old grandfather on my mother's side has told me because he's a sailor," Ino said, laughing. "Kakashi, since he told us about this old man, or as some were calling him, an old salt they met back in Wave Country, he said that he told them stories about the Black Fox. Well, old salt describes my grandfather to AT. The stories he's heard and what he saw the fox himself do is something I at times found hard to believe. But after just seeing him and his teammates in action force, starting to wonder just how much of it is real." According to Ino, one of the stories he heard was that all of the mariner or pirate lords have been gifted with these amazing abilities that make them very hard to kill. One of those said abilities is something about turning into these walking skeletons that are neither dead nor alive. But it is said if anyone else possesses this ability, it would be a curse upon them. At this point, many other Chunin homegoals were listening in the hopes of learning more about the unpredictable ones they might be facing. "My grandfather was with a merchant convoy to the Crescent Moon Kingdom when they were attacked by several Water Nation warships that proceeded to attack them without provocation. However, they forgot all about the fog." "What's so scary about fog?" inquired one of the genin from the hidden sound village to follow. Ino glanced at him and replied, "On the high seas, it's a deadly weather phenomenon, makes it almost impossible to see what is right in front of you, or what might be hiding, and which is exactly what happened to those water ships." As she continued, all of the shinobi were paying close attention to her story. And that's where they came from, two of the most feared mariner lords and their ships, the Black Vixen, and is kept in the blacks, as well as her ship, the Rookin, ship of Lady Rouge herself, known as the Voodoo Queen of the Land of Lightning. She stopped for a moment to get another beverage. "Before the water ships could even do any serious damage to my grandfather's ship, they came in like a swarm of locusts, firing cannons like it was nothing, but there are still too many shapes. That is what my grandfather saw him did." He stretched out his hand, blood dripping from her strange noise, and saw something move through the water. Within seconds, one of the smaller ships of the enemy was pulled under the water, breaking in two at the center. The other two surviving Water Nation ships tried to make a run for it. I thought there swore he concurs and screaming out the word Kraken. Just then the last ship was pulled down by the side, man screaming out for mercy, but none was given to them for what they already did. It was the locker for them all. This shocked everyone, and some had heard the same story. Now that everyone in the room was worried about these pirates, one of them pointed to where two mist ninjas had been sitting, and everyone was shocked to see that the seats were empty. In order to avoid any trouble, the Phoenix Nest officers kept a close eye on the water and sound vessels. However, they were not looking at the sea because a small group of Aqua Special Forces was moving underwater in the direction of their targets, which were the sound vessels. Lady Rouge led the group, and Ao, a one-eyed mist shinobi, moved beneath the waves as they continued toward their destination, which was the bottom of the ships and the location of Ao's implanted Byakugan, which would enable them to plant their bombs directly beneath the sound vessel's powder magazines. In addition to hiding the chakra and sound from beneath the water so that no one would notice them, Everyone was making every effort to plant bombs so that their detonation would appear to be an accident. They returned to their own ships in a matter of minutes, thankfully evading enemy detection. Once on board, the Great White May and the Water Daimyo were patiently awaiting them as they removed their breathing apparatus. I take everything went as planned? Lady Rouge simply nodded her head. Myself and the team were able to successfully plant the charges directly under their power magazines. If it was not for ours, I would never have been able to succeed. If they tried to attack, we will have an advantage to use against them in the future. May turned to her country's leader and calmly said, that should take care of a few things. I'll see you in the morning. Remember, the next part of the exam begins soon. Be prepared. The Water Daimyo and May nodded their heads as the team went to bed to get ready for the next day. All of the Chunin hopefuls arrived in the center practice area with what appeared to be a giant scoreboard and several large statues by the next day's afternoon, when the proctors were informed that all of the competitors who would make it to the tower were already there and that the next section of the exam would start. As the proctors and the Hokage explained that this section of the exam would be a 1-on-1 battle royale style fight to decide who would advance in the exam, the two mist teams were prepared for it. After everything was said and done, he saw that the first two competitors would be Team 7's Sasuke Uchiha and another Leaf Shinobi, whose name he could not recall, entered the fighting arena below. From what they had learned, many of the same rules from the Forest of Death still applied here in this section of the exam. Sasuke eventually managed to control the curse seal and defeat his opponent, but he was clearly suffering from the effects of using his chakra and trying to suppress the seal. The battle was quite interesting because the young Uchiha was unable to access his chakra as well as he liked, making it difficult to control his attacks and keep the seal in check. His sensei took him into a back room to deal with the snake issue as soon as he was proclaimed the winner. At this point, Naruto and Kisame noticed the sound sensei trailing the Cyclops into one of the tower's back rooms, which was extremely suspicious and went unnoticed by the Leaf forces in the room. As they entered the room, the swordsman and the pirate nodded to one another and immediately followed their suspicious target. The scene they saw was, to put it mildly, intense, with the renowned copycat ninja getting ready to thrust his lightning fast attack into the rogue Sanin's chest. I thought you already had your market on that young boy Snake, or are you just trying to get some extra credit for good measure for whatever you're planning? Asked the older man in the room before he could move after hearing clapping and seeing Naruto and Kisame emerge from the shadow of the archway. Orochimaru would be lying if he claimed he hoped to avoid encountering any of them, including the infamous Pirate Lord and any other former or current members of that group. They became afraid of him because they knew he had two of these people standing only 5 feet away from him, eager to pull out their weapons and attack him. In addition to feeling a strong desire to apprehend his sensei's young, lost son and return him to his home here in the Leaf, Kakashi was now deeply troubled by what had transpired and could only hope that things would work out for him and his disabled young student. Since everything he had planned with this young boy was going as planned, the Snake Sanin could only smile inwardly. Nevertheless, he still had to deal with the two dangerous groups of ninjas on either side of him, knowing that they would do everything in their power to easily defeat him. He was shocked to see that the two newcomers had moved aside, though. Why are you opening a path for me? Because we're here to compete in the exam, and while killing you would be very pleasurable, it would also interfere with our own ambitions, so we will make you a deal. You leave us alone, we leave you alone until this is all over, but if you attack us at any time, Snake, we will kill you, Naruto said to him with an air of seriousness in his tone. I'll leave and I know you won't come after me, pirate. As for you, Hitaki, I just came to see if my little project was progressing as I expected, and as things are going I'm more than pleased, Orochimaru said, looking back and noticing that Kakashi wanted to pursue him but was unable to do so. He also realized he could make his escape, but he was taking the pirate ninja's threat very seriously because he had already betrayed the young man multiple times and did not want to be the target of another quick kill. Kakashi turned to the two of them and asked, "Why do you two let him go?" He was shocked by what had just transpired, but he wasn't going to get caught up in the moment. Do you really think any of us would have gotten out of this without some form of damage, considering that he has to compete in the exam, aside from you having to tend to your student? Kisame asked, turning to face the one-eyed Leaf Ninja. He just nodded in agreement and watched as they left the room together, both of them aware that much more was going on than they knew. A good number of points had already been scored, and fortunately none of the missed competitors had finished yet, so the two of them returned just in time to witness the young Nara defeat his female opponent from the Hidden Sound village. Naruto then turned to face the scoreboard, which showed both his name and that of a young man named Kiba Inuzuka. He said, "Whatever you do, Kiba, do not underestimate this young man." But as he leapt to the ground below, he saw the unsettling expression on her face and said, "I got this one in the bag, sensei, don't worry about me." The black fox then performed a backflip off the railing and landed on the arena floor as if it had never happened. The proctor then said, "Let the match begin." And the two of them, along with one dog, now stood just inches apart. The proctor immediately backed up and watched as the young dog user leapt forward, hoping to avoid giving his opponent a chance to counterattack. However, he was caught off guard by the fox, who grabbed him by the wrist, literally threw him against the wall, and swiftly took the little puppy in the head, knocking the little white dog out cold in the process. Even though Kiba was in excruciating pain, he managed to get to his feet and was startled to see his partner unconscious on the ground after just one blow from his opponent. Unfortunately, his impetuous personality kept him from clearly considering the situation, and he hurried his opponent once more. Naruto had already had enough of this match and needed to move on. He immediately started to instill some common sense in his young opponent, who was unable to mount a strong enough defense to halt the crushing defeat he was getting. However, up in the stands, his cousin and sister were aware that, in all honesty, the boy and dog were getting away with it because they had witnessed Naruto go all out, which, in all honesty, had left people on the Hokage's level begging for their lives. "Well?" Naruto asked the proctor as the young boy lay on the ground, still conscious but immobile. "Winner, Naruto Uzumaki." The young man was then addressed by Naruto, who said, "Not bad kid, but you need to learn control, if you don't it will kill you." The fox gave Hinata a smile as she went to tend to her teammate, but he also noticed that she looked familiar because he had assisted her years before he left the village. He watched her tend to her teammate, then noticed that both of them were staring up at the scoreboard. He was also taken aback by the two names and learned about the clan's troubled past because of that bird seal. "How bad is this cousin?" Karen asked, feeling the tension in the air despite her limited knowledge of this clan's thoughts toward her cousin. He sent her the message, "Very bad. She had been kidnapped by a foreign shinobi from the land of lightning and the hidden cloud village when I was still here," while maintaining his gaze on the arena below. "What happened?" Her father intercepted him before he could make it out of the village and killed him in the process. It was revealed mania that the kidnapper was in fact an ambassador and that this village and the Hyuge Council decided that to prevent a war they would sacrifice that young man's father instead of hers to prevent war from breaking out. Naruto said to her as they watched the battle took place. The person in black screen out said, "Don't take his shit, Hinata. Show him there's more to life than hate." Neji was trying everything he could to break his cousin down, but he was shocked to hear that. Everyone watched the altercation between Hinata and her cousin and realized that it was a gentle fist style trunk show. Hinata nodded her head to him and was secretly happy to see him again, but she wanted to keep that fact to herself as she got ready to fight him and hopefully bring him back to the light. Even though Naruto really wanted her to win, he could have told them that her cousin had already used up all of her chakra points and had not come out of the fight unharmed. However, this was insufficient to declare victory in a rather cruel manner, saying, "You cannot fight me anymore. Fate has determined that you lose this match today. No cousin, it is you who has defeated this day, and I pity you for it," she said, looking up into his eyes with a defiant expression. Almost everyone attempted to stop her cousin's sudden and vicious attack on her heart, but she was unable to prepare for it. The Black Fox himself now held the offending hand in place, just inches from her heart. "Tell me, young Neji Hyuge, is her desire to reunite your family really that bad? Do you want this revenge upon someone who is instant from it enough to risk your very soul? Tell me, do you fear death?" "Boy?" Naruto turned to the young branch member and spoke in a deadly tone that left no trace of his intentions toward this young man. Unfortunately, Naruto was aware of these types of attacks and knew that she needed immediate medical help, but fortunately, the damage would have been much worse if he hadn't acted quickly. As Naruto tightened his grip on the young man's hand to make his point and threw him across the room as if it were nothing, everyone in the room became extremely terrified. He then swiftly picked up the young girl and carried her over to a medic who had just entered the arena, saying, "If she dies, you die." "Make sure I get him, old man," Naruto said, looking up at the Hokage as the medics nodded their heads and started working on her right away. The lights were impressive, to say the least, but far from the level of combat his team was accustomed to. In a flash, he was back up in the competitor's area as if nothing had happened. Only a handful remained after the majority of the other battles were finished, including a few hidden rock ninjas who made the decision to face the remaining mist teams. The arena itself needed to be repaired, which took several minutes to finish, but Tayuya was able to engage a rather unusual earth user who wasted no time in doing so. By the time they were finished, she was proclaimed the winner. Naruto and his cousin would closely monitor Gaara during this time so they could determine when to take action, but it was obvious that they couldn't do anything for her right now. Suigetsu and another Earth Ninja faced off in the following match, but the Earth Ninja chose to forfeit rather than engage Suigetsu in combat because they were aware of his violent reputation on the battlefield and at sea. Even though Haku and Isaribi were unhappy about having to fight, they soon showed that they were more than a match for most people. This was the next match. Karen, on the other hand, became quite irate that no other competitors wanted to even consider taking her on after the match ended in a double knockout and the arena was once again badly damaged due to their flight. Karen was pleased that she had at least moved on, but she was also disappointed that she had not been given the opportunity to fight in this section of the test. At the same time, she hoped that she would at least be able to compete in the finals. The proctor then said, "The final part of the exam will take place 1 month from today, so you have plenty of time to prepare for the final as there will be many dignitaries and important people here watching your performance." After this, everyone lined up on the arena floor to hear the final exam instructions. The proctor went on, "Now in this ball is a number that each of you will then in turn will take a number that will determine who and when you fight. Now please take a number." At this point, everyone started chatting among themselves. Each of them took a number and displayed it for everyone to see. Naruto gave the hearing man a gloomy smile that essentially said, "Get your affairs in order," as soon as he realized that his and Neji's numbers were partners. At this precise moment, Suigetsu was not a happy camper because he was being made to carry Isaribi's unconscious body while Zabuza carried Haku in his arms and out of the tunnel that connected the tower to the outside of the Force of Death. The former Seven Swordsman apprentice would have spoken, but after observing the expressions on the faces of the 3 Uzumaki, he decided not to speak at all because he knew how dangerous they could be. The 3 Uzumaki remained silent while thinking carefully about their final strategy. However, before they could leave the tunnel more than a few feet, they were stopped by what appeared to be a number of Anbu Black Ops who were waiting for them. Their battle. Hardened reflexes kicked in almost immediately, reaching to their sides and forming a protective circle with their comrades. Sensing what was going on, the Anbu retreated to give them space before declaring, "We are not here for a fight, only to deliver a message." As Naruto said, "And what would that message be?" In a tone so ominous that there was no possibility of misinterpretation, they all started to tighten their grips rather than loosen up. In the hopes that they would comply, the lead Anbu stated, "The Hokage and the councils of Konoha request your presence for an emergency meeting." It was still possible to see the bewildered expressions on their faces despite the masks. "Well, tell the council and the Hokage that we are disinclined to acquiesce to your request." When he said, "It means, no, gentlemen, now if you'll excuse us," the Anbu were taken aback and attempted to move forward. But after becoming quite irate and agitated, the lead Anbu stood in their way and said, "I'm afraid this is non-negotiable. You will be coming with us whether you like it or not." However, before things got out of control, they were startled to see a number of mist shinobi standing ready, including none other than Mei herself, who said, "I'm afraid you can't do anything to them, sir. They do have diplomatic immunity, Mr. Anbu. But Naruto, I think it might be healthy to pay them a little visit." "Very well, we will come, but if you think that we will not fight back, you'll be dead wrong. Mei, walk with me." "Now," the Anbu said, turning to face the Black Fox after observing the gears turning in his mind. As the other 2 younger redheads approached him, it was evident to everyone that he was not feeling well. "I don't know what the hell you were planning, Cage, but if there is some joke I will send you to the locker myself," they said. Mei liked to intimidate people, despite what many people may think. However, the 5 pirate lords were the only ones who could do it and get away with it. At the moment, one of them was furious with her in front of her, and he also happened to have a 9. Story. Tall fox with an attitude problem stuck in his stomach. You didn't want to be on the wrong side of them. Even the civilians of Hidden Leaf, who had previously tormented him, were now avoiding him as much as possible because they could feel the hatred emanating from someone who was a complete idiot and had pushed an Anbu out of the way in an attempt to reach Naruto only to be hit by a backhand slap that sent him flying into a nearby wall so hard that it cracked, making everyone even more terrified of him. Did you just see that? Asked one of the Anbu members who was berating the four missed ninjasha or pirates. Depending on your point of view, when one of his colleagues had to go arrest a man for assaulting a person who had diplomatic immunity. Yeah, I did. He's a far stronger than we thought. If you all think I'm just going to step one foot into this lion's den alone, you got another thing coming, since I don't trust any of you all. At all, Naruto said as he swiftly pulled out his handguns and pointed them at the faces of Mei and the girls as they entered the council meeting room. It goes without saying that everyone was discussing his return as they entered the Fire Shadow Tower. Enough all of you, now Naruto, I would appreciate it if you did not threaten or kill any of my soldiers, but to be honest I can understand your reasoning, and I would also like to know who was trying to stop the Mizkage from assisting him in this matter, considering that he is currently representing her village in the exam, said the third Hokage, who could use a broadsword to defuse the situation as best he could. Now Lord Hokage, what is it that you want of me? Naruto asked, re-engaging the safeties on his guns and putting them away while maintaining constant contact with them to demonstrate to everyone how serious he was about the situation. You will show the proper respect to us, boy? Asked one of the obese civilians, who appeared to be offended by his behavior. The older redhead then said, you do not deserve our respect, you fat fool, and if you even look at me and my cousin like that again, I will personally strap your feet to a cannon and drop you in the ocean. Am I clear? Naruto and the two younger redheads, much to this man's surprise, started laughing at him before swiftly drawing their guns and pointing at his face to make their point. One of the shinobi council members then said, please forgive some of the civilian council members, Lord Uzumaki, as they know not who they antagonize. This council, including them, unfortunately have requested to talk you to try to convince you to return to your homeland here in the Land of Fire. The fat man could only nod his head as they lowered their weapons once more, but this time they did not put them away. And what makes me think that anything will be any different this time around? Has anyone even bothered to look into my mother's murder? Naruto asked, unable to believe what he was hearing. I thought not. Only certain members of the Uchiha clan would even bother to help us out from time to time, and with them all dead now I can only imagine the state of affairs in this village, he said, knowing the answer before anyone else could. After that, the older redhead said, I agree with my brother on this matter. Another council member then said, what do you mean by brother Ms.? And one of the civilian council members went pale as he realized the true identity of the young woman. She looked at him and replied, my name is Tayuya Uzumaki, I am the daughter of the fourth Hokage, and this is my brother, as you all know, since you made his life a living hell as well as my mother's. Since this young woman was actually the long-lost daughter of their great leader, everyone in the room was now extremely concerned. Any attempt to persuade them to return would now be extremely difficult, if not impossible. Convincing these young people to return to the Hidden Leaf would require a miracle in and of itself, and even the third Hokage recognized that their chances of doing so were now as slim as ashes from a fire. After examining everyone's faces, Naruto asked, is there anything else you wish of us? In a voice that could be heard by everyone. The Anbu that had been watching the door opened like the Red Sea for Moses, not wanting to agitate these young pirates who could destroy anything in their path and still survive. Everyone in the room watched as they left the room with a sense of defiance in their walk. What do we do now, my lord? Asked one of the council members to the Hokage. I honestly don't know anymore, he said, feeling his age catching up with him even more. I just hope we can fix this before it's too late. When the three pirates and Water Shadow strolled down the Hidden Leaf village street with a specific goal in sight, Mei felt as though she had upset them all and made them acknowledge the size of their clan. However, the four of them came to a complete halt when they heard a number of senior officers who were associated with the members of the civilian council talking about them. So there's three of them still alive, is that what you're telling me? They asked. That's exactly what I'm telling you, but there's only one male Uzumaki left, and he just happens to be the son of the fourth Hokage as well. The other man drank and said, well, if that's the case, then what is the council going to do? Everyone at the table practically spat out some of their drinks or almost choked as they stared him in the eyes. I'm glad you asked, old friend, but it turns out they're going to push the Clan Restoration Act or CRA on him. Are you sure it can even be done? With some excitement on his face, he remarked, do you even know just how powerful the Uzumaki clan is? They're royalty, my friend. The other man said, royalty, are you serious? Yes, my friend, royalty, even though that young man doesn't look like it, he is the owner of an entire country, the other man said with a sly smile. That young man is one lucky son of a bitch, he is going to live every man's wildest dream. I know what you mean, man, but at same time has to be very cautious of who is going to end up in this little family of his. I see what you mean, the other man said, nodding his head. The last thing I would want is a Uchiha fangirl on my butt. Naruto turned and started to walk away like a man possessed after all three of the redheads who were standing close to him could hear the rage and hatred radiating from him, including a growl. Not a word, okay. May beat both of his relatives before they could even utter a word. The third Hokage had just learned of the CRA that had been passed for one Naruto Uzumaki. The headache he was getting was unlike anything he had ever experienced before, and he realized all the issues this would cause in the future. He made the obvious remark, "I'm too old for this shit." The civilian council member who advocated for this sat in a chair and looked at everyone with a hint of concern on his face, saying, "I did not know this was going to create a problem, sir. If anything, I thought this might help them." At this point, everyone in the room could only agree with him. How is this supposed to be helping them? If anything, you just made matters 100 times worse. Enko asked, staring at the civilian as if he had gone completely insane. His clan is extremely powerful but also on the edge of extinction. It is estimated that there are no more than 10 members left in the entire world at this time, and only a few of them are even male, the civilian in question said, speaking for everyone to hear. Asuma questioned the man, "But why would you push for the CRA anyways?" "Because it offers them some protection against men and women who wish to take things from them, say like if that clan dies out. Both of them." This comment had piqued the interest of the third Hokage, who asked, "What do you mean both of them?" "I mean the fact that Tayuya is the heir to the Namikaze clan since she is the firstborn, but Naruto is the first male that was born, so he was made the Uzumaki clan heir, which gives him complete control over all the finances and special pieces of property that are controlled by that clan. In fact, when he disappeared after his mother's murder, the Neo-East India Trading Company attempted to seize all of their property, but due to certain laws they were unable to succeed. This act will protect them even further." One of the ninjas in the room asked, "You do realize this is going to be seen as an attempt to see some part of their fortune?" The civilian smiled and said, "Not in my case, I only have 2 sons and they have just married. Inform every one of our forces to give him and his family a wide berth for the time being," the third Hokage said, pinching the bridge of his nose. All of the participants nodded and proceeded with their tasks, each pondering the future of their village. As the small group attempted to give Naruto some time to process what he had just learned, the journey back to the water fleet had been fairly quiet. However, as soon as he stepped onto the Black Vixen, everyone on board realized that something had happened to trigger his irritable temper in this way. A young female voice called out, "Naruto, I know you're up there, can I talk to you?" As the majority of the crew tried their best to ignore him, understanding that he still needed to calm down and would inform them of the current situation when the time was right. With a little growl, he approached the edge and waved the young girl, who appeared to have bonds on the side of her head, to board, saying, "Permission granted, Tenten." Karen was pleased to see that her cousin still had at least one friend in this cursed village that had previously caused their family a great deal of suffering. The young girl, who seemed to be no more than a year and a half younger than their captain, was motioned to follow him into his private cabin as soon as she arrived on the ship. "I take it by the growling you've heard?" Tenten asked her longtime friend and potential love interest as soon as the cabin door closed. Taking off his battle jacket, gear, and maelstrom sword, he gazed directly at her and said, "Believe me, I had no intention of this ever happening. I'd like to know who the hell did this, so if you give him a piece of my mind." After shaking her head and guiding him to the room's couch, she said, "My dad knows the man who pushed for the CRA on you. Apparently this man did it knowing that there are certain international protections that come with it, including certain things that protect your father and mother's companies from the East India Company." He growled again when he heard the Neo-East India Trading Company mentioned, saying, "They always try to take what is not theirs. I can respect the man for that, but I still do not want this on me. I hate to say it, but there's nothing you can do about it, Naruto. I do have to admit one thing though," he said to her, "and that would be," she said with a hint of emotion in her voice, something she hardly ever displays to others, "It does give me a small chance that I could be with you one day, but I want to get to know you better and really follow up with you, but I don't want to give up one of my friends either." Even though he was still a little upset about what had happened, he had to acknowledge that they had started to feel something for one another. However, He also understood that his fights were over, so he went to her and held her in his arms while they stood there quietly, allowing the world to pass them by for the time being. The two red-headed girls' ire grew as they learned that one of the requirements required them to have at least one child by the time they were 22 years old. Tenten had brought the CRA's requirements with them so they could at least see what was happening, as it affected not only Naruto but also Yuya and Karen. This, however, was nothing compared to the expression on Naruto's face when he learned that she was expected to have at least 3 or 5 wives and at least one child each. Unless, of course, she had 3 wives, in which case she would have to have 2 children rather than 1. The only bright spot was that he had until he was 24 to decide how many wives and who would be in the special harem, as it was known. When Karen read that the council might order them to be artificially inseminated in order to ensure conception on their part as well, she exclaimed aloud, "This is insane, cousin. Don't the 3 of us have any say in this at all?" Yuya asked, looking up at Tenten, unable to believe this had happened and how bad things were going to get. Tenten clarified what she had discovered, saying, "I'm afraid it's a little more complicated than that. From what I was told, because of your clan's unique status and remaining political power as well as who you are related to here in Fire Country, then you 3 are considered too important for your clan to become extinct." The assembled ship crew in the Vixen's main dining hall started to agree with Yuya as well. Naruto said, "I sense a but coming on?" to her. "It's a big one. You can leave the CRA and retain all of its political protections if you can have enough children by marrying just one person or select group of people. To be honest with you 3, your clan does need to come back in the world, and I just don't mean because the 3 of you are assassins or anything," said one of the older crew members, who was also from the land of whirlpools and was known to everyone as Old Salt. He even had a parrot on his shoulder. "But since your clan has saved so many people from the dark, I believe it's time for you to do it once more, and we'll be here to support you." Naruto then said, "Well, that's all right, but what am I going to do about finding these young women who will accept this at all?" to their applause. "You have someone right here who wants to marry you, and that's a place to start. We can move on from there," Tenten said calmly after placing her hand on his shoulder, much to the surprise of everyone. Since they knew her well, the crew all nodded and grinned at his first choice. Their captain took note of this and said, "You guys aren't going to start playing matchmaker, are you?" "Maybe, but we will all definitely tell you if we don't trust any of your choices," Old Salt replied. "So what you're saying is that if he can have enough children, we can also get out of this?" Karen had to ask. After giving a nod, Tenten stated, "That's the deal. Your clan currently only consists of 3 known members. In order for you all to leave, that number needs to increase to about 12. "Works for me, so what do we do now?" Naruto said, grinning at his crew. Because of what he had done to young Hinata, Neji Hyuga had been shunned by everyone he knew at home like the plague. However, whenever he felt he would prevail, he was constantly attacked by visions of the Black Fox laughing at him and standing over him. The young Hyuga prodigy was unaware that Orochimaru, the Snake Sanin, was watching him at the moment and was only grinning at the opportunity to exact revenge on the Black Fox. The Snake Sanin had not anticipated the young prodigy turning on him in a combat ready formation when he emerged from the training field's neighboring forest. To demonstrate that he was here to speak rather than engage in combat, Orochimaru raised his hands and said, "I have been watching you and I must admit I am rather impressed with what I have seen so far, Neji Hyuga." Without lowering his posture, Neji merely asked, "What is it about me that you find so fascinating?" "That's simple. I saw your desire for revenge. I know all about your clan's foolish history because of using that caged bird seal upon your forehead and its falling that has torn your family apart." The snake told him to pay attention. If Neji claimed he didn't care about what the traitor was saying to him, he would be lying. "And what would you offer me in return, and what do you want from me in return?" "That's very simple really, my young Hyuga. I wish for you to become more powerful of course, but what I get out of this is the annihilation of the Black Fox," the Snake Sanin said with a sly smile. "Tell me now if you're interested." With a sly grin of his own, Neji asked, "When do I start?" Orochimaru's neck appeared to shoot out at Neji's neck with lightning speed as soon as he said, "Right now, but first allow me to give you a little gift to help you on your way." "Are you sure of this, Tenten? After all, this is a very big decision," she said, and the third Hokage glanced between father and daughter in his office. "I'm sure, sir. I've been in love with him for a while now." The third was not looking forward to losing one of his most promising young shinobi, who had in fact specialized in a variety of weapons, but he had to acknowledge that it did provide him and the village with a means of at least staying in touch with Naruto going forward. "How will things be set up for this wedding, my lady? I know you will have some concerns of your own," he said, returning to the water daimyo after expressing his happiness for the two of them. The water daimyo nodded her head and turned to Dad. "Sir, besides the two of them making this decision, I would also like your blessing in this matter, as it is only fitting that you have some say in this matter, and also because of his political satirist we have decided to hold the ceremony on the small island of Kide, which is not that far from the Phoenix Nest Naval Base, is also not that far from our new embassy which is currently under construction at this time." Her dad nodded and then said, "I have no problem with the young man at all and in fact approve of it this greatly. I am however only concerned that I will not be able to pay for this extravagant wedding." "Not to worry, sir, the land of water government, and by that I mean myself, will be footing the bill for this one," said the lady daimyo, with a smile and a little laugh. The third Hokage also breathed a sigh of relief at hearing this, since he first and how expensive weddings could be, especially one like this that had massive repercussions on a global scale. The water daimyo could see what he was going to ask her next and beat him to the punch. "Do not worry, Lord Third, as we are handling the invitations as we speak." Although this satisfied him, he still wanted to know the exact time of the event. "When will the wedding take place?" He nodded in agreement as she stated, "1 week before the finals, Lord Third, and don't worry, we have definitely invited you and your family, and I'll send an envoy to pick you up when it's time for the ceremony." He understood that this would be one of the most important events to occur in the Land of Fire for a while. After a week, Tenten and her father had decided to remain aboard the Black Vixen while Naruto taught her how to use the Brotherhood's weapons, including the Hidden Blade and its companion, the Hook Blade. However, she also needed to learn how to navigate a ship and even take command of it in combat if necessary. To Tenten's disappointment, her father was already a skilled sailor and was actually teaching her new skills and putting the crew to the test. When the girls weren't practicing Brotherhood customs or learning the ropes, they were busy organizing the wedding, knowing that the ceremony was just 2 weeks away and the finals were just 1 week away. Though Mei could still tell that Tenten was a girl at heart and hated her tough and dangerous exterior, she had to acknowledge that Tenten was her idea of a true kunoichi, unlike those pitiful young girls who dared to call themselves ninja in the first place and won't really be anything other than fangirls. As Tenten modeled a stunning wedding gown for her special day, she turned to face the women in attendance to get their feedback. They all nodded, indicating that this was the dress for her, and even her father, who appeared to prefer to be somewhere else at that moment, gave her the thumbs up. She was asked, "Are you saying yes to the dress?" by a man and a woman dressed in businesslike suits. Then Tenten exclaimed, "Yes, this is my dress," with a crazy smile. While one of the staff members was putting the finishing touches on the dress, all of the women were yelling and cheering. Tenten could only imagine what would happen on the wedding day. "It's like a dream come true. I just can't wait for my big day, even though it's a 2-week wait." "Well, you'd better wait, little girl. Until you are married to him, little girl, you will not be doing anything in the extracurricular, if you get my drift," her father said, rolling his eyes. Although his face turned pale, she said, "Fine, Dad, but you do realize that you probably will be a grandfather by this time next year. Please do not remind me." Okay, I have to ask this, what made you want to become a kunoichi in the first place?" Mei asked the bride after laughing at their intakes. "Well, it was hearing the stories about Naruto's mother and the tales of Lady Tsunade of the Sannin that first inspired me to become a ninja, and then at the same time I've seen women that give a bad name to kunoichi, like those fangirls for starters." As they heard about locating additional gowns for the ceremony, all of the professional female ninjas in the room could only nod their heads in agreement. As the 3 men discussed the ceremony and what was actually happening, Naruto walked with Jiraiya and the third Hokage. The third then said solemnly, "So that is what he is planning. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, old man, but you do deserve to know what he has in store for you." "Well, this shit sure complicates things. No matter what, we only have 3 weeks before the exam final, and what is he planning?" Jiraiya said, shocked by what he had just learned and realizing that the finals would be very dangerous. "We at least know how he is going to launch this attack, but what do we do in the event that he succeeds in his primary goal of eliminating you, old man?" Naruto said, stopping in his tracks and turning to face them. Then the third turned to face them both and said, I already have a plan, and whether I live or die is to be executed after the exam, and I want you two to handle it personally." "And that would be?" Jiraiya asked, worried about what his sensei was saying. "You are to bring Tsunade, my 5th Hokage successor, back." Another week had gone by without any problems as the Toad Hermit, or Sage, depending on who you asked, worked tirelessly with his extensive network to locate his fellow teammate Tsunade, but he had been completely unsuccessful thus far. The stress was starting to get to him as well, but he persisted because he knew that this was best for everyone, not just the village. The third went into the room where his perverted student was gathering all the information on Tsunade's current location. He felt a little sorry for his more intriguing pupil, saying, "You look like you have been up for quite some time, Jiraiya." "I never thought she would be this hard to track down, Sensei," Jiraiya thought, looking up at his old sensei with bloodshot eyes. "I've only got bits and pieces right now, but I have a feeling that after the exam I might just be able to get a couple more leads on her. All we can do is hope. In relation to our hope, where is Naruto?" "He went to the hospital to see that young girl that he promised to avenge. I hate to admit it, Sensei, but that girl's cousin has become quite a problem as of late," the elderly pervert replied. "You mean young Neji? His well of fire is being tested like never before, Jiraiya," the third said, letting the years catch up with him as he sighed and moved to a chair. "I am very afraid for him now because he has allowed his own darkness and despair to cloud his judgment to the point where he is unable to see that young girl as his clan's only hope for stability and redemption. That kind of darkness and despair will surely draw Orochimaru to him." "I know what you mean, old man. He's got no fear or humility for that matter in any part of his body, or that old Hyuga stick is so far up his ass that we will never get out. Your old teammate would choose him for one reason, to fight Naruto." Jiraiya couldn't help but giggle. "Maybe I was wrong about that stick up his ass being unmovable. If my old teammate thinks that giving that kid one hell of an overhaul is going to be enough to beat the Black Fox is almost laughable. If anything, that kid is going to get his ass handed to him." "I pray you are right." Naruto and his sister and cousin had just finished seeing Hinata because Tenten had wanted to see the young girl, but the hospital of Konoha was turning out to be more of a headache than he had initially thought. Naruto was relieved to see that she was well and recovering without any issues, but he could not get rid of a sense of dread. Fortunately, the doctors stated that she would fully recover without any issues because of the prompt treatment she had received at the central tower. The two siblings were not alone, though, as their cousin and Tenten had followed them into the hallway. On what some would describe as pure instinct, they activated their eagle vision and saw what appeared to be an enemy trail leading towards the room of one Rock Lee. He turned to face his sister and saw the same expression on her face as well, and he gestured for her to follow him out of the room to investigate. When the four of them entered Rock Lee's room, they saw Gaara's form about to strangle the young nin in his bed. Before Gaara could realize what was happening to her or that there were other people in the room, Naruto, who had entered what some would refer to as total Black Fox mode, grabbed her by the shirt and threw her out a nearby window. Fortunately for Gaara, they were only on the 3rd floor of the hospital, which made it very easy for someone of her caliber to prepare for battle, and she did not have to wait long. She was completely shocked that someone had gone the drop on her so easily and had managed to land properly despite what many people might think was not enough time. Within a second, her sand came to life, blocking a slice from the maelstrom bladed thanks to Naruto, who knew he would have to test her limits in order to break the seal that the snake Sannin had forced upon her. They locked eyes and started fighting like there was no tomorrow. As the battle went on, which was going as planned, Gaara grew more and more unstable. Fortunately, this was an empty section of the hospital courtyard, which also happened to have a small river flowing through it that was connected to a huge waterfall on the property. In one amazing display of strength and speed, Naruto was able to get past Gaara's defenses and kick her in the midsection, sending her flying straight into the waterfall at breakneck speed. Gaara was left stunned, realizing that her main weapon and defense were now, for all intents and purposes, useless. Gaara let out a blood-curdling scream because it was too painful for anyone else to bear, and Naruto appeared right behind her before her already compromised mental state could get any worse. Naruto's special speed technique allowed him to move faster than most people and drive his hand home, starting to undo the corrupted seal from its victim. Both Nato and Tayuya noticed a strange feeling coming from their swords and realized that another of the 7 Mariner Lord blades must be nearby. He swiftly grabbed the redhead young woman before she could fall into the water and brought her to the shore where the others were waiting as soon as he finished removing this pitiful excuse for a seal. At that precise moment, Gaara regained consciousness and met Naruto's gaze. She smiled at him first, then pulled him into a passionate kiss that surprised everyone, including him. Following the kiss, she released him and said, "You have no idea how good that felt, my fiancé copyright." However, she was taken aback by the shocked expression on everyone's faces. "Gaara, what are you talking about? Let me assume my dad didn't tell you about the marriage contract that our parents set up before we were even born," Gaara said, rolling her eyes. With a shocked expression, Naruto said, "I'm trying to get out of the CRA, not further in." As Gaara went on to explain what would happen, Tenten found it hard to believe what she was hearing. "Well, my father obviously did not tell you anything about the contrast, did he?" She went on, "That figures. From what I could figure out, it was set up as some kind of peace treaty between the Leaf and Sand villages," to which Naruto could only shake his head. "Don't get me wrong, Gaara, I do like you, but it's more like a friend. Why does this shit keep happening to me? And don't get me wrong, I don't want to ruin our friendship, but I might come to like or even love you." Gaara smiled at them before saying, "Well, that works for me, as you three did save me from myself, but there is a way out and I would love to try it out if you get my meaning." All three of the Uzumakis suddenly got what she was saying and did their best impression of a fish trying to breathe out of water. "I really hate my life right now. Let's arrange things so we can finally get rid of that snake bastard, but we'll figure something out later, Hot Fox." Luckily, the snake Sanin was not aware that the black fox had destroyed his seal and that Gaara had returned to her true self, but they had long since mastered the art of deceit. As she told him about the memory seal and how the snake Sanin Orochimaru was the last person to be with her because the seal had been applied against her will, the young sand user had told her siblings and sensei that her father, the Wind Shadow, was not acting normally and that something might be happening soon. The water forces agreed to help the sand ninjas as much as possible during and after the battle, and they were now waiting for the ideal moment to attack the hidden sound forces. As of right now, Naruto was in his own cabin, studying his charts and maps to see if he and his crew could use any advantages against the sound forces on the day of the invasion. To date, he had only concluded that the bay in which their ships were currently located was wide enough and deep enough for the water navy man of war to maneuver without any issues, as well as enabling them to deploy their sails to gain maximum speed using one of their special abilities despite their impressive size. Because of their more streamlined size and design, which allowed them to be both fast and maneuverable in combat, the 5 Mariner or Pirate Lord ships would also have no trouble at all maneuvering in this area. Naruto was impressed by what he saw as he walked on deck to watch his crew in action as they get ready for the upcoming battle day. Old Salt approached his captain at this point and said, "Captain, everything is ready for the upcoming battle. I was just curious, though." Naruto turned to the old sailor and asked, "I don't think you ever wondered about anything, Salt, so what is on your mind?" "Everything. So much has happened. She found me that pub kid all those years ago. I never imagined for a single moment that I would live to see the day that any of our country would even rise again, but here it is floating on the ocean, moving from one place to another with a purpose again," Naruto said, nodding to Old Salt. "The fact that you and your sister are reviving our traditions with the ocean and the brotherhood is enough to make an elderly man cry with delight. The funny thing is, Salt, I never asked for any of this to occur. I was just a little child who had to flee to save himself, and I caused all of this by doing so. Doesn't it make you think?" The elderly man grinned at his captain. "You know that everyone believes in you, Naruto?" "I do, but even I have limits, and I fear that our enemy will never stop until we are all dead and gone from this world. And that's why you fight, my young captain. But keep in mind that they have attempted to destroy the Brotherhood and have always failed. Don't get me wrong, they have caused us great pain, but we never give up because we must never forget that nothing is real. Everything is permitted, for we are assassins." Tenten and her sensei Might Guy, or simply Guy as he was more widely known, watched their teammate Neji continue to train for his impending exam match, but it was his behavior that was alarming them since they saw him grow more erratic and vicious in his fighting style, which was completely out of character for him. "What is wrong with Guy's sensei?" Ten asked, turning to face her sensei. "I honestly do not know Tenten, but his flame of youth has been corrupted somehow." With a frustrated expression on her face, she turned to face him and said, "Please, sensei, I don't know with the flames of youth. but I do agree with you that something has corrupted him, but what? Tenten's warning signs were going off in her mind as she recalled that the snake had made a deadly enemy of her future husband and that if Neji was also trained by the snake, it could be a very dangerous fight. At that moment, they noticed a strange looking seal on the back of his neck that was somewhat similar to the one that young Sasuke also had on the back of his neck, courtesy of the snake Sanin Orochimaru. Sensei, it's critical that I get to the Black Vixen immediately. With almost everyone else watching and betting on who would win because of the legendary luck of the Uzumaki clan, Karen and Tayuya were playing a card game on the deck of the Vixen. The two redheads were staring at each other with an intensity that had hardly ever been equaled by two hardened warriors in the heat of combat. Full house, they said simultaneously as they laid down both hands and added a few more chips. Oh shish. Never again. Everyone in the house was shocked when the two girls simultaneously yelled those words out because they had both managed to fill the house with two different suits. They had been hoping for one of them to win, but instead they were met with yet another draw. As the crew's antics caused Old Salt to shake his head, he heard a boat approach the Vixen's bow and saw young Tenten, who had a very worried expression on her face. Permission to come aboard. As always, I'm grateful, but could you tell me why you seem so worried? As he assisted her in boarding the ship, he asked her. As he gestured for her to follow him to the captain's quarters, Old Salt's expression changed from one of mild curiosity to one of action. I have to see Naruto at once, it's important. It has something to do with the person that he's fighting in the exam. At this point, the cabin door was open, and the two people entered the room with worried expressions on their faces. Naruto could see Tenten's worried expression and knew that something significant had happened. What happened, Ten? Are you okay? After giving him a nod, she said, I'm fine, but I noticed something on my teammate Neji that appears to be a curse seal. Naruto immediately took notice of this and gestured for her to sit down so he could ask, tell me exactly what you saw and is he acting strange? At this point, Karen and Suigetsu went into the cabin together, and she started to describe what she had seen. He has been acting strange ever since you told him at the finals that you would defeat him, and today my teacher and I noticed a strange-looking seal on the back of his neck. To her cousin, Karen said, it must be Orochimaru's doing. I bet you that he saw some potential in Neji to defeat you and not only gave him the curse seal and has undoubtedly already advanced it to its final stage. Karen was shocked by what she had just heard. The snake probably thinks that he can use a young Mr. Hyuga to finally destroy me and then being rid of my threats to him. If only he knew that this will backfire upon him, as I have no intention of dying that day and I intend to beat some sense into his head if need be. Tenten was taken aback by this remark and inquired curiously, you gave the impression that you were going to murder him. Have you changed your mind or what? I don't intend to kill him, Ten. I just intend to beat some sense into his head, he said, turning to face her eagerly. However, I will terminate him as a last resort if he proves to me that he is irrational. Tenten was taken aback by his statement, but she also understood that this might be the only way to save him from the choice he had made because his clan was unable to adapt to the modern world. Tenten knew that her friend's only hope was that the statement would give him a pretty good beating, or else they would be reduced to a mere pawn in the snake's deadly schemes. Go and get my sister right now, he said, turning to face Suigetsu. Knowing that something significant involving their family's special seal related skills was about to occur, the former mist shinobi swiftly turned and departed the cabin in search of his captain's red-headed sister. Now Ten, tell me everything you can about that seal and everything. The small group of sailors and pirates entered a bar called the Drunken Leaf because Mills was getting married in less than a day and many of his fellow pirates thought it was time for him to have a night out. The barman instantly looked up and smiled as he gestured them forward, saying, Welcome. Welcome, it is good to see you all have come. It is also a pleasure to see you again, boy. The bartender was astonished to see some of the most infamous pirates enter the establishment as though they owned it. The fact that the black box was actually someone the old bartender knew startled all of the ninja who had gathered. Although it's nice to see you again, old man, but enough with that, as we do believe that we have a table with our names on it and some good rum waiting for us. He then led them to a space that had been set aside not too long ago and gestured for a number of young ladies to bring them a substantial amount of food and beverages, primarily rum. Right this way. Asuma, the son of the third Hokage, and his grandson were among the numerous ninjas in the bar at the time. Everyone in the room started to listen to their conversation, asking, Do you all remember that prophetic captain who was given command of that man of war and thought he could kill us all? As he recalled that specific battle, Naruto grinned and said, "Yeah, I remember that battle quite well, Jack. He was a fool to antagonize Minerva and Rouge that day, and if you listen carefully you can still hear him screaming for mercy from the lovely ladies." The pirates all nodded their heads in agreement, and then, out of curiosity, one of the gentlemen said, "Whatever happened to that ship?" Jack follows up by saying, "Where you think the girls some sunk it out of spite. Those are two beautiful and dangerous women who I do not want to be on the bad side of." The group's younger male member turned to Naruto and said, "Captain, what are you going to do now?" The assembled sailors simply raised their glasses in a toast and said, "And may it be a great one, Fox. I honestly do not know, gentlemen, but I do now that I'm about to take on one of the greatest adventures of my life." A warm rum filled their bellies as they all took a swig, saying, "This fire country rum ain't half bad." "You're forgetting, my friend, that we are in a ninja village. The best rum in this country is at the shipping docks." The Black Fox said, "I got a good story to tell. All of us lords already know it, but you guys, I can tell you do not." The men all agreed as they started to narrate those sea stories, not realizing that Neji had also come into the bar to look at his opponent. As he went on, the story begins with a man who was made first meet a ship called the Black Pearl. He was a man who would later be called so evil by some that hell itself spit him back out. The entire bar was listening. Everyone in the bar was startled when he continued with the tale. His captain had been tricked into giving up the bearings on this unique island that cannot be found except for the who already know where it is. Once he had the navigational bearings, he marooned his captain on a deserted island and left there with nothing but a single shot and a pistol to end it all. They then arrived at the island and discovered the chest of gold coins waiting for them. They spent every last one, Neji said, listening and speculating about the story's meaning. However, they quickly learned that the food they consumed turned to ash in their mouths. The drink did not quench their thirst, and all the enjoyable company in the world did not quench their lust. The entire group of them were cursed men. "So what happened?" inquired one of the ninjas present. "For 10 long years, the heathen gods hunted down every last bit of gold because they demanded that it be returned with a blood sacrifice. Incapable of dying, incapable of surviving." As they approached a small patch of moonlight, Naruto and Jack both got up and said, they could feel nothing, not the sea upon their faces or the warmth of a woman's touch. He then walked forward into the moonlight with Jack and said, "You all better start believing in ghost stories, because you're in one now." He then put his hand in the moonlight and terrified everyone in the bar, with the exception of the pirates, who watched his hand turn into nothing more than a skeleton with pieces of flesh on it. After saying this, he took the wine's cord out and drilled the contents, frightening everyone in the bar as they struck his skeleton. When Neji realized that this must be their incapacity and that it only showed up at night in the moonlight, he realized that he could still kill the Black Fox and then the snake himself. He fled the bar in terror, wondering if he could kill the fox. After deactivating the genjutsu, Naruto burst out laughing, saying, "That is one of the best damn ghost story that I have ever heard or told, and the illusion helps out a lot." But then Jack said, "He was here, you know?" And the two pirate lords turned to face one another. After Naruto finished his statement, they went back to their table, had a few more drinks, shared a few more stories, and headed back to the ship because the following day would be very special. "I wouldn't worry about him, Jack. He doesn't know what's really coming." On their way to the small island where Naruto and Tenten's wedding ceremony would take place, the small water nation fleet, which included 3 men of war and 5 pirate lord vessels, moved silently through the blue ocean waves. Tenten was below decks when the Rookin got dressed in her lovely wedding gown with the assistance of Lady Rouge and May. As she helped the younger girl into her dress, May could only smile and ask, "How are you feeling? Are you anxious?" Tenten responded, "I would be lying if I said no, but at the same time I feel rather happy about this day," unable to conceal the expression of both happiness and concern on her face. "That's to be expected, young lady," Rouge said with a little laugh, "but I'm curious about what you're going to do once you're married." She said, "Well, I have a feeling that I'm going to wind up getting pregnant sooner or later, but I have no intention of trying to stop it either. If it happens, it happens." Tenten already knew what she meant. Rouge's response to the young blonde was a simple smile. "It's quite understandable, young one. When it is your time to be a mother you shall know for sure, just as I did." Tenten was shocked to hear this. "You don't look that old, but you have kids?" "I'm actually only about 38 years old, But I look 22 for my children. I have 2 of them who live with their father on our special island so that our enemies do not find them, Rouge said, nodding her head in agreement as she addressed the younger girl in front of her. Are you missing them? Tenton inquired. Yes, I do a lot, but I do get to see them from time to time when we are not busy. They are very loving children and help me with some of the problems that I am under, Rouge replied. But just then, a young man from the ship's front deck hurried into the cabin, his face displaying concern, saying, Captain, there are several ships off the port bow that are headed this way. Which flags do they fly? She questioned him. Neo East India Trading Company, Captain. Tenton put this on over your wedding dress. Do you have your weapon on you right now? She asked, instantly transforming into a woman of action. After hastily approaching a small space and displaying a rather large scroll of some sort, Tenton nodded and said, never home without them. Karen, Tayuya, and Old Salt all gazed out at the ocean, admiring its beauty and vastness, only to discover that a rather large storm was rapidly approaching them. Fortunately, the storm was not en route to the island where the ceremony would be held on this particular day, but it still piqued their interest because they all saw the Rookin and the Cut Sea pulling up alongside the Vixen. What the hell are you all doing here? Tayuya hurried up to them as soon as she realized something terrible had just happened after seeing Rouge and Tenton jump on the Vixen from the Rookin and being swiftly followed by Jack. As the Neo East India Trading Company approached quickly, they all gestured to the side of the ship and said, oh come on, and gave us a break. Then she said, I'm going to go and get Naruto, and everyone keep an eye on those ships, and they all just stared at her. Naruto, we have enemy ships off the stern of the Vixen, she exclaimed as she dashed to her brother's private cabin and rushed straight into the room. He hurried past her and onto the deck, where he took out his telescope to get a good look at the NEIT ships. He saw that the lead ship was outpacing the rest of the fleet and had come closer than he would have liked, but what really infuriated him was the person he saw on deck. Well, that's something you don't see every day, sis. Have a look, sister, and see one of the men who helped kill our mother, he said, passing her the telescope and aiming it at the enemy ship's bridge. After saying this, she immediately looked through the telescope and saw for the first time one of the men who had stolen so much from them both. She was filled with anger as she heard her brother yell commands to the crew of the Vixen. To arms, gentlemen and ladies. Before us is the so-called mighty Neo East India Company who believe themselves above all laws of men. He continued, we will not endanger the fleet, but we will not fire the first shot either, to the attentive attention of the entire crew. Who's with me now? We'll give it to them if they want to fight. As Naruto took command of the ship and steered it straight for the storm, the entire crew let out a collective shout, preparing the vessel for battle. Despite the torrential rain that the storm had dumped all around them, the Black Vixen moved swiftly through the water when one of the lookouts yelled, Maelstrom. Without hesitation, Naruto changed his direction and went straight for the Maelstrom. Jack then yelled at him, what the hell are you doing? I'm going further in, they be crazy to follow us. Then Jack asked the younger captain directly, are you angry, Fox? Really now, Jack, are you scared of getting wet? He asked, turning to face the older pirate. They were all taken aback by the sudden burst of cannon fire as multiple cannonballs sped past them and struck the water, but one of them did manage to strike the upper part of the Vixen. Captain, Naruto said, turning to face Jack. At this very moment, Webb takes the helm of my ship. Naruto swiftly assumed command and started giving orders, pull out all the canvas and speed you can boys. Give it all that you can and remember that dying is the day worth living for. Jack was only able to smile at him. After running to the rear of the stern to gauge the enemy ship's proximity, Naruto yelled, fire the stern cannons. As the enemy ship continued to close in quickly, all of the projectiles struck true, sending a portion of the deck flying all over the area. Naruto promptly ordered a reload of the guns before turning to Jack and saying, they're gaining on us fast. Then we go further in, we can then cut across the faster waters, Fox, Jack said after taking a quick glance back. Prepared to broadside the men, Naruto then yelled at his soldiers. As the Vixen made her turn and moved deeper into the Maelstrom, all of the gun crews instantly went into action, getting their weapons ready for the moment of firing. A few seconds after finishing the turn, multiple more cannonballs struck the water, forcing the enemy ship to follow them even closer. Naruto swiftly turned to Old Salt and signaled for the older sailor to go below decks to supervise the gun crews there as the 5 pirate lords and 1 bride watched the enemy ship attempt to keep up with the much faster Vixen and struggle to maintain its position in the maelstrom as they positioned themselves for a powerful broadside. When he said, "Just wait boys until they are board to board with us before firing," 2 of the defenders kept turning to face their superior. As he waited for them to be in perfect firing position, Naruto used his eagle vision to study the enemy ship. The mariner lords all cried out in unison, "Fire!" just before the enemy ship could even fire her own broadside. As soon as they finished speaking, thunder erupted throughout the Black Vixen's deck as the cannons released their lethal explosive payload. As the battle continued, each shot that struck true caused enormous damage and sent splinters flying everywhere, killing numerous people on board. The ships drew closer and closer to one another as the battle dragged on, firing shot after shot at one another. The Vixen, for the most part, took her hits without any issues, but she delivered them on a much more lethal scale. Several members of the Vixen's crew then observed that a large number of the enemy crew was preparing to board their ship at that precise moment. "Captain, what should we do as they get ready to board us?" Naruto himself pulled out several of his main guns, which were just a few of the many weapons he carried with him at all times, and started to make them rule the day they dared to challenge him and his powerful ship. They started to board the Vixen at that exact moment, but were met with resistance as many of them were shot off their ropes and into the maelstrom as they attempted to board. However, many of the enemy sailors survived the barrage of bullets that were directed at them and started fighting like there was no tomorrow. Naruto and Tenten had fought the enemy together, moving as a single, coordinated attack team, killing their opponents as they went. At this point, Naruto had just killed another enemy and turned to face his future wife in all her beauty, spending a few seconds simply admiring her before going back to the fight. Tenten felt the protective garments over her wedding dress being torn away by one of her attackers, who was then slashed with a sword as retribution for his actions. Naruto could take it no more and turned her around, staring into her eyes, saying, "Let's just get married right now." The 2 of them were now fighting back. Back. Everyone could see the shock on her face as she said to him, "I don't think now is the best time." They then had to move to avoid an enemy who was running at them. "Now may be the only time. I do love you. What is your answer, 10? "Captain Jack, marry us," she exclaimed, turning to Jack after grinning at him. "I'm a little busy at the moment, guys," Jack yelled at them while engaged in intense combat. Then Naruto yelled, "Jack, you ass, do it now," to his fellow mariner lord. "To nail your ass to the mast, you son of a bitch," said another adversary before Jack could even finish his next sentence. He sighed and said, "Fine then, dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. Tenten, do you take me to be your husband?" Naruto asked her as he turned to begin his vows. "I do." "Great." Tenten started her vows. "Naruto Uzumaki, do you take me to be your wife, in sickness and in health?" At that point, she had to literally impale one of the enemy soldiers on her sword before muttering, "With health being the less likely." They then had to avoid another group of enemies chopping them down as they went. "I do." Still fighting his enemies, Jack said, "As captain I now pronounce you," for everyone to hear, but before he could finish, he had to impale another soldier and shoot another in the head as the young couple tried to kiss, running into the same issue. "You may kiss." Then another foolish soldier appears, now lying on the ship's deck as lifeless as a freshly cooked lobster. As they attempted to kiss again, Jack yelled, "Just kiss." The 2 men then swiftly embraced any intense, passionate kiss despite the commotion all around them. "You may kiss." The interruptions were starting to get annoying. Despite their own conflicts, Rouge, Karen, and Minerva could only watch the couple kissing in all their beauty and uttering sighs of pleasure or comments about how adorable they were while simultaneously impaling enemies on their swords and frightening a lot of the male pirates in the process. As the whirlpool from the maelstrom continued to rage, the larger enemy ship had already suffered considerable damage and was starting to sink farther into the water. One of the cannon shots struck in an area close to the bow, causing a massive explosion that literally tore the front of the ship off, sending even more enemy soldiers upon the Vixen as they attempt to escape death in the deadly storm. The captain of the enemy ship himself was one of the adversaries who landed on the Vixen's desk. Despite the hardships of life at sea, the man was quite large and wore a rather fine piece of clothing, and one of his hands also seemed to have been made of puppet-like materials from the land of wind. He had a blood-red cross around his neck that marked him as a Templar. Using his odd prosthetic hand, he pulled the sword from his side and charged into battle, killing several members of the Vixen's crew along the way. However, Tayuya gave him a foot to the face. Naruto quickly turned to Jack and yelled, "Get us the hell out of here, Jack, or it's a locker for us all." The man looked at the two siblings and simply laughed at them before saying, "Ah, the children of that red-headed bitch. Don't worry you two, I'll be reuniting you two with her soon. Tell me, do you fear death?" Jack nodded to him and started to make the course straight out of the maelstrom as they all watched the enemy be torn apart by the wrath of the massive whirlpool. In response, the big guy watched them both form a battle formation and charge straight at him. The big guy was a pretty good swordsman, but he encountered no help from his usual allies in these kinds of battles where he would use his crew as well to get an advantage. After killing a few more of the enemies on the Vixen, Tenten turned to see her husband and sister Law engaged in combat, along with the odd man who appeared to be attempting to cut them down. As she approached, she noticed that the sword he was carrying had an odd quality, as if it were calling to her. After the two pirate lords engaged in combat saw the sword of one of their fallen allies and recognized him as the murderer of the Fire Lord of the Mariners, Naruto became even more furious than before but maintained his composure, saying, "So you killed him, you bastard." After chuckling and grinning at them, the big man remarked, "It was so easy to end him, boy, and now I will add your blades to my collection." Had Tenten not knocked the sword from his grasp, he would have continued, saying, "No man can kill me now, not even a Mariner Lord." Naruto and Tayuya then stabbed him in the heart, but to their surprise, he survived the wound. He started to laugh when they both withdrew their swords from his chest, but as he did, he felt a surge of pain as the tip of the sword he had been wielding moments before appeared out of his chest, exactly where his heart should have been. He watched as the sword was removed, leaving behind what appeared to be burning flesh, and turned to see Tenten not only holding the blade but also unaffected by its powers, which shouldn't have been happening. He then realized that a young girl had ended his life. "My beloved, forgive me for what I have done," he whispered as the fire engulfed his body, leaving him stunned. When they emerged from the maelstrom, Naruto kicked the man off the deck of the Vixen and said, "May you find peace in the next world, you bastard, rest in peace." The remaining portion of the enemy ship was literally torn apart as the whirlpool closed in on itself, sending water skyward for everyone to see. As the Black Vixen emerged from the storm, the fleets of the Land of Water and Mariner Lord and the Neo-East India Trading Company watched. The Vixen pulled up alongside the NEIT fleet, their guns still ready for action if necessary. Naruto then called out to the other ship, "Come and collect your dead and the survivors, get them off my ship right this instant." The East ship's captain gestured for the crew to follow the Black Fox's instructions right away. He then turned to face the ferocious looking pirate lord and said, "You will pay for this, pirate. Don't push your luck with me, boy. Every single ship that was traveling with me could have fired on your fleet at any time they wished. The only reason you're all still alive is because I wished it, so don't push me," Naruto said, looking the man in the eyes and speaking in a darker tone. The East Fleet's captain nodded and signaled his crew to work more quickly to remove the dead and injured from the Vixen's deck. When they were done, the black ship quickly departed and joined the water fleet, leaving the captain even more confused. One of his officers approached him and asked, "Should we open fire on them, sir?" After giving a negative nod, he said, "No, I won't risk the fleet's safety for some delusion of grandeur and desire for fame. The admiral brought it on himself. Besides, you have to be crazy to take on the Black Fox." Naruto strolled along the Vixen's deck, keeping an eye on his crew. Eventually, he approached the ship's doctor, who everyone on board just called Bones, and appeared to be very busy tending to the crew. "What's the butcher's bill today, Bones?" Naruto then introduced himself to the older man. "Bones." He turned to his young friend and said solemnly, 3 dead, 4 injured, not critically, mind you. All in all, I say we got off pretty easily." His glasses were put back in his face. "Damn, I didn't ask for any of this to happen, Bones." The doctor gave the younger blonde a nod before placing his hands on her shoulder and saying, "You made the right choice. If you have not done that, he would have gone after the entire fleet and not just us. It would have been a lot worse, I'm afraid, and a lot more lives would have been lost." At the very least, Naruto had to acknowledge that there had been a lot more casualties than during his time fighting for the Land of Water's independence. "I'll never get used to losing people, Bones." In an attempt to console him, the doctor told him, "No one ever does, Naruto. We have to make do with what we have, and in your case you made the best choice you can, all things considered. Listen to you, the philosopher. The physician sighed and replied, damn it man, I'm a doctor, not a philosopher, and if you do want to speak to a philosopher, just go talk to Raven or your wife. She seems to have a good head on her shoulders. Don't go there, Bones, but I do hate to admit it that you may be right to speaking to Raven, Naruto said after giving the doctor one of those looks. With interest, Bones observed the young lady's new weapon and asked, is that the fire blade? Yes, that son of a bitch killed him. After giving a negative nod, Naruto repeated, no, but she will soon. So when are you going to marry the others? Asked the doctor, who then forced a smile. With a moan, Naruto turned to face the doctor and said, please don't remind me, Bones. I already have to watch out for Gaara, so I don't need you promoting me to all the women in the world, you know. We just want what's best for you, Fox. I'll be done with setting them up for burial in a couple of minutes. Thanks, Bones. Jack then approached her and said, I have to say that was one interesting way to get married. Tenten had noticed the looks she was getting from the crew and had wondered what they were all about. She said, it was, but can I ask you a question? While meeting his gaze. Go ahead. Why are they looking at me now all of a sudden, and what's with that look? They're looking at you and that sword. Ten. Who knew what she was talking about in reference to the sword she was holding. She was truly taken aback when he went on to clarify, Tenten, the blade you are holding at this moment is one of the 7 swords of the Mariner Lords. This one is known as the Fire Phoenix. And the reason they are all looking at you is because only a Mariner Lord can even hold that blade or the next wielder that it has chosen. You make it sound as if the sword is alive, she asked, looking at the sword in her hands, genuinely taken aback. For all we know it is, each one of them is aware in a way, and you will have to control its power and ability. Also, either the last lord will choose their success, or in this kind of case the blade will choose its new master, and it has chosen you, Tenten Uzumaki, to become one of us, and fortunately you will have help. Despite what had transpired earlier in the day, the water fleet had proceeded on its course. However, it paused so that the Black Vixen and her crew could honor their fallen comrades. All 3 captains and their personal Jolly Rogers were on deck, waiting to be reunited to see their loved ones die. I pray that this is the last time I have to do this, but I know that it will not be, and while they are gone from us we must continue to fight our enemies that wish to enslave us or murder us just for who we are and what we can do. Naruto read from the good book, sending his fallen crew members on their way to the next world, hopefully keeping their souls at rest and undisturbed by their enemies. One of those men passed away today as well, but unlike our comrades, he will not rest in peace, because when he died it was without honor. As he turned to fulfill his duty, everyone in attendance agreed with him. We now commit your souls and bodies to sea so that they may be restored when the resurrection happens. Until then we trust for you to wait for us. As the bodies were thrown overboard to eternal rest in the vast ocean, another man started to play bagpipes. Despite what transpired during the battle, the couple had chosen to hold another ceremony on the beach as originally scheduled after the fleet eventually arrived at the small island where the celebrations would be held. Sadly for Suigetsu, Karen was the one who had grabbed the flowers from Tenten, giving him a shiver he had never experienced before, especially when she gave him a sly glance. At this point, Naruto entered the stage that had been blocked off for musical performances, grabbed a guitar, and began to sing to his new bride. They started dancing when he unexpectedly approached from behind and she recognized that he was a shadow clone playing the music. Requiem, a love song by Training Yesterday. As Tenten listened to the lyrics and realized how much the song reflected her husband in many ways, she started crying uncontrollably. Eventually, the song stopped, and they were shocked to see Tayuya walk up on stage, play guitar, and make a head movement to her brother's shadow clone as the two started playing a song that would even bring the couple together. The Lumineers, Ho Hey. As the music took over, everyone in the crowd joined in, feeling as though it lifted their spirits after the recent events and the war. They even started singing the line, "I belong with you, you belong with me, you're my sweetheart." Then, after everything they had been through, his sister and clone started singing a particular section of the song that they believed was significant to everyone in attendance and passionately signed it as the news that everyone needed to hear. "Love, we need it now. Let's hope for some." Everyone on the beach cheered and drank to their heart's content. One man was heard saying, "Well, Captain Fox, she fancies you all right, and to all of us here, drink up for tomorrow we dance with death once more." knowing full well that his words would be true on the next date as the exam and their date with great battle began. Among other things, Naruto and Tenten settled into their personal catalysts to spend the first night of their marriage together as the fleet returned to Phoenix's Nest to await the events of the following day. As the Chunin exam stadium appears, the Black Mage's song Otherworld begins to play in the background. It was a busy day in the Hidden Leaf Village, with crowds going into the stadium to watch the upcoming battles with a sort of ravenous appetite. The daimyos, who controlled the nations, were among the common people who came to take in the spectacle. With the exception of Sasuke Uchiha and his one-eyed sensei, almost all of the competitors had arrived. Neji was attempting to intimidate Naruto by staring him in the eyes, but he was unsuccessful because he was unable to see the Pirate Lord's eyes. "Will all other competitors please leave the arena at this time?" the proctor said, and everyone nodded their heads before heading up the stairs to the competitor's booth. "Thank you," he said. When the proctor saw that the two young men were staring at each other, waiting for the right opportunity to attack, he stepped back a little and yelled, "Fight," for everyone to hear. After saying this, the two of them launched themselves at one another like a ferocious pair, exchanging blows one after the other as the boy had only just started. Neji hoped he wouldn't have to use his special abilities, but he had a feeling he would because he thought the Black Fox was actually holding back. As the battle continued, this only made the young Hyuga even more enraged. Contrarily, Naruto had witnessed intense fighting during the war on land and in the sea, which had hardened him to a point that few people would even comprehend. Then, in an attempt to find a weakness, Neji chose to go straight to the psychological source. "Are you aware that fate has determined me the winner of this match, pirate?" "Fate, is that your excuse?" he asked, after which Naruto could only laugh at him. He smiled darkly as the seal around his neck further influenced him. "It is not an excuse you are fated to lose to me this day. It will show that pirates are just like every other person in this world." Then he said, "Except we are not like most men, boy, we are pirates, and we defy all expectations," which only made Naruto laugh even harder. As Neji's anger grew, he made the decision to put an end to this battle once and for all. Without warning, he used the first level of his curse seal and charged directly at Naruto in the hopes of killing him there. The young pirate lord, much to Neji's surprise, was keeping up with him but was having trouble stopping his attacks. Sadly, some managed to get past his defenses, but Neji realized that his opponent could still fight back viciously after he was hit with a powerful fist to the base that sent him flying a few feet before he hit the ground. Knowing that he must force his opponent to reach the final level in order to defeat him and possibly save him from himself, Naruto reopened his block pathways and proceeded, saying, "Not bad for a slave." "What did you call me?" Neji asked, his eyes full of hate. "You heard me, boy. You are nothing more than a slave not only to your family but if fate itself. I know what happened to him to your father, and I know that he defied fate itself. We chose to save your uncle's life. I should know I stand with the third and my mother before she was killed." Instead of trying to control the curse seal that was placed on him, Neji allowed his anger to take over and transformed into a monstrous creature with spider-like legs that protruded from his back. Now, Naruto tried his hardest to stop the angry young man, but from the audience's point of view, he was completely defeated. The Black Fox was then thrown hard to the ground by Neji, who then kicked him in the chest, sending him flying into a nearby tree. Neji then turned the proctor and declared, "Call the match, he is defeated." Everyone's attention was drawn to the sounds of bones being repaired, though, as Naruto emerged from the wooded area with his sword ready, acting as though nothing had happened to him. Naruto just approached them and said, "Will, I can honestly say that hurt like hell, but in all honesty I've had worse." This caused a surprised expression on everyone's face. "However, I now have to break you and that slimy soul fragment of a pedophile that calls itself a Sanin. You must have thought that I would be an easy victory, that you could kill me with each. Am I right?" he said, shocking Neji and the proctor. Naruto said again, "Well, you thought wrong. Remember that story you overheard me and Jack telling everyone in that bar? Well, guess what, it's all true." Neji could only nod his head. "That's right, boy. You'd better start believing ghost stories. Because now you're in one," said the young pirate lord, who appeared to burst into blue flames in front of Neji, who was still trying to comprehend what was happening. Before Neji could reach the ground, the flaming skeleton grabbed him and started to beat him for the rest of his life. The fox was a blur of motion, with all 8 of the extra legs that had been a part of his body literally flying off from a single cut of the maelstrom. "You cannot defy fate. Compared to you I am a god," Naruto said calmly as he approached his injured opponent, who had managed to get back on his feet, after the last punch was so powerful that it sent him flying into and then through a nearby tree before hitting the ground. Everyone was shocked when the large tree finally went down. The skeleton simply gave him a confused look before suddenly grabbing him by the ankle and repeatedly slamming him into the ground on the left, right, and left. He then held the battered young man up so that everyone could see him before slamming him into the ground 3 more times, creating a sizable crater while muttering the words, "Puny God." Neji was lying on his back in the newly formed crater, groaning in the most unbearable pain he had ever known. He realized that he would never be able to defeat the Black Fox, but his ordeal was far from over when a skeleton hand caught him by the shirt over his chest, lifting him into the air. To his surprise, the hand then tore the clothing away, exposing the curse seal itself. Then, Naruto touched the curse seal, opening its internal mechanisms and releasing the fragment of the snake Sannin's soul that was inside. This piece of the snake's soul screamed in pain, and what no one could see was that the real snake, dressed as the Wind Shadow, was gripping his chair in excruciating pain as it felt everything that was being done to the fragment up in the cage's booth. The fragment, which now resembled a snake, then started pleading for its existence, saying, "Please have mercy." Naruto simply let out a left and then uttered the words, "Like the mercy you have shown your victims. I'm sorry, I'm all out of mercy, you bastard. Look into my eyes." By this time, the burning skeleton had released poor Neji, who had fallen hard to the ground, and had returned to normal, no longer under the influence and power of the cursed seal. After staring into Naruto's eyes and screaming in agony, the soul fragment literally started to burn as he said to it, "Your soul is stained with blood of the innocent. Feel their pain and rest in peace." The blue flame then appeared to vanish completely from him as he approached the injured Neji, put his sword to the young man's throat, and said, "Ask your uncle what happened that night and know that if you ever hone your cousin again I will be there to bleed you dry. Do I make myself clear?" In the original build fragment, he saw everything as it was gradually burned away in front of everyone in the stadium. "Crystal," he managed to say through pain. The man could only know his own thoughts as he declared the winner while observing the young pirate lord approach the rival's booth. "Well, that's good. Now if you'll excuse me. Call the match proctor, it's over." By this point, Gaara had come to the arena floor to wait for her opponent. However, he did not show up for 5 minutes, which infuriated everyone for his tardiness. The crowd was furious when it was announced that the fight would be postponed after speaking with the Hokage, who ultimately decided to give the boy a chance to compete. However, the young redhead's words, "Silence, I kill you," silenced the crowd. The older sister turned to her brother and said, "You just had to make that dead terrorist dummy." Her brother and sister, who were also her teammates, felt a little ashamed. Gaara clearly wasn't a happy young lady because she went back into the competitor's box and then approached her siblings without saying anything, even though they knew she was upset that she couldn't compete against the haughty Uchiha. Naruto was also a little let down that he was unable to witness Gaara in action, even though it would have been an amazing demonstration of her talents. Gaara's older sister and a lazy young man from the Nara clan were the next 2 competitors in the tournament. The latter was on the verge of losing the match when Naruto shoved the lazy Cloud Watcher off the balcony and into the arena below. Needless to say, the sound of someone cursing could be heard throughout the arena. Every competitor watched this match with some interest since the 2 of them proved to be an extremely formidable fighting force against one another, causing much of the arena floor to be disrupted as they went. To everyone's surprise, Shikamaru ended up winning the match even though he was prohibited from doing so. When he took out a small golden pocket watch and noticed that the match had taken a while to finish, Naruto could only laugh at his antics and level of skill. He then looked up at the cage booth and wondered when it would start so he could finally put an end to the snake once and for all. His only task now was to bide his time until the moment came. Orochimaru was now extremely worried about the invasion because he had heard tales of the 7 Mariner Lords' abilities and what they might do if they were threatened. He also thought he saw the Black Fox's skeleton face almost smile at him as he was destroying the piece of his soul. In essence, he was now hoping that his plans would destroy the pirates as well as the Fire Navy in this so-called prophetic village. The only reason he might not kill them was to deal with the threat posed by the Red Clouds and other Templars, but that was not the plan for today. No, He had intended for them all to die by the end of the day, in particular, the assassins. By Naruto's standards, the remaining matches had flown by rather quickly. He had been taken aback by the majority of the matches, but he had to confess that the majority of the battle styles thus far had shocked him even more. Even he had to acknowledge, though, that the majority of them had, for want of a better term, not been particularly surprising in their results. The next battle, which pitted Shikamaru against Temari, was an intriguing one. The battle itself was a demonstration of the two sides' various forms of intelligence and ended with Shikamaru's forfeit, despite the fact that he had clearly won the fight. Rather than being primarily a physical conflict, it became one of strategy and intelligence as the two continuously looked for an opportunity to attack. Naruto could see that he had forfeited the fight in order to conserve as much energy as possible for the impending invasion. Regrettably, forfeits appear to be the norm these days as more and more people decide to forego fighting and conserve their energy. Even the proctor had grown quite agitated and was on the verge of calling the match despite everyone's wishes when a tornado of leaves appeared in the center of the arena, revealing none other than Sasuke and his sensei. Eventually, the match between Gaara and Sasuke had returned, leaving the redhead standing in the center of the arena once more, waiting for her opponent with the same expression of displeasure on her face. Everyone who had been anticipating the start of this match was now practically yelling with excitement. Naruto signaled for his fellow pirates to take their places since it was time to finally solve the hidden leaf snake problem. He knew that the invasion would soon begin. As the battle raged below them, he looked up at the cage booth and saw that Snake had already started things off. The 5 pirate lords then moved to the roof that was attached to the cage booth. The Snake's bodyguards swiftly erected their barrier, understanding that they needed to keep as many of the stronger ninjas, particularly the pirate lords, out of the makeshift arena so that their master could finally put an end to his old teacher's life. The 5 warriors of the sea didn't have to wait long because an explosion was set off in the booth, shocking everyone in the process. In order to approach his former teacher, the Snake swiftly tore off the flesh mask he was wearing to pass for the cage, saying, "I told you should have picked a new Hokage and retired old man." With a simple smile, the 3rd Hokage addressed his deceased pupil, saying, "You are right, my old student, I should have retired, but you did not take into consideration them." DC's Thunderstruck begins to play in the background. As they started to physically transform, the Snake turned his head and saw 5 Mariner Lords standing just outside the barrier, grinning at him with a predatory grin. Naruto once more transformed into the skeleton, but this time, the blue flames that surrounded his skeletal structure seemed to be replaced by wind. Then came Minerva herself, who seemed to transform into a sort of ice angel with huge wings made of pure ice, lifting her into the air for everyone to see. His sister, who seemed to be changing into a giant wolf of some sort, let out an ear-splitting howl as she stared him down with a look of ravenous hunger and desire to tear him limb from limb as she did so. The last one was Lady Rouge, who merely held her sword in one hand and played with what appeared to be a voodoo doll hanging from the hilt of her sword. Like the others, she transformed into a walking skeleton with pieces of dried up flesh on it as she and the other mariners advanced towards the barrier. Jack, who appeared to transform into a large great white shark hybrid, then bared his teeth at the Snake in a grin that revealed his many rows of sharp teeth. Orochimaru was in complete shock as he saw all of the Mariner Lords change into these menacing figures and simply shattered his barrier as if it had been nothing at all. Naruto then brought up the maelstrom and in a downward arc released a blade of wind at the barrier, completely destroying a large section of it and allowing the 5 pirates to enter the arena with ease to finally put an end to this inhuman terror once and for all. Had he been any other man, he would have followed his instincts and immediately fled, but lately he has become somewhat defiant and chose to leave them a parting gift instead. After all, they had just walked right through and were now staring him down like a predator stalking its prey with intent to kill. Orochimaru could only stare in shock at what he was witnessing as the 5 Mariner Lords bared down on one of the most dangerous ninjas in the world up on the roof. He had heard stories of their incredible power, but now he wanted it for himself, but he knew that he would undoubtedly die in the process. So he activated the Imperial World Resurrection Jutsu and prepared to flee, knowing that this was a fight he could not win. Almost everyone in the stadium was now watching what was happening up on the roof. The presence of the Mizkage and the 3rd Hokage did not help either. They all assumed fighting stances in preparation for the resurrected cages. Knowing that he needed to reach the Sound Fleet as quickly as possible, Orochimaru then flashed his own raptor like grin and signaled his bodyguards to follow him as he leapt off the side of the stadium and called forth one of his rather large snakes to make his getaway. "Naruto, you have to go after Orochimaru right this instant and stop him from whatever he's planning to do," said the third Hokage, turning his head to face the wind-blown skeleton. After saying, "You got it, old man," he then turned to face his sister and nodded to her as they resumed their normal routine. They then leapt off the stadium's side and summoned too many eagles in midair as they followed the path of devastation left by the fleeing Snake Sage, who had called forth his own ride that was now tearing through not only the Leaf ranks but also his own as he made his escape. Unfortunately, everyone could see where he was going. As they took off to find their target, Tayuya asked her brother, "It looks like he's going to Phoenix Nest Harbor?" As they followed their prey, Naruto could only nod his head in agreement with her, knowing that they would soon be engaged in a fierce battle. However, he was also unable to stop thinking about what would happen to the other people in the village. When the mud clone of his former student, which had been left behind, inserted strange-looking knives in the back of their heads, bringing them completely to life as the jutsu took effect in the three affected by this, the third watched in horror as the two cages and the three remaining Mariner Lords stared down the three reanimated five shadows, hoping to find a way to resolve this without further casualties. Although this gave them a slight advantage in the upcoming battle, the defenders discovered that they were still conscious but unable to control their bodies as the first Hokage started warning them about what he was going to do well on this strange autopilot that had been forced upon him. Suddenly, the first Hokage created a small forest on top of the stadium, giving himself and his brother the best chance because this was their type of terrain to fight in. The knife that had been in the fourth Hokage's head just fell out, hitting the exposed tiling and turning to dust as she did so. To everyone's surprise, however, Lady Rouge went straight for him, pulling out the mud clone as she went, and managed to grab him by the face while reciting some sort of voodoo chant. The fourth was taken aback to find himself in charge of his actions once more, but he understood that, as part of the agreement he had made to save his house, he would soon return to the land of the dead as an agent of the death god. He turned to the rotting woman and grinned as he recognized her, asking, "Been a long time, how's your brother by the way?" "Much better now, he has taken your comments to heart and has made life of our two hosts very comfortable," said Lady Rouge, rolling her eyes at him. "That's good. I know I don't have long on this plane of existence, but may I ask a favor of you?" Despite turning to ash and getting ready to go back to the afterlife, she nodded her head in agreement as he said, "Please help my children grow stronger and avenge us and all the others the Templars continue to hurt." He nodded his head at her and left the sacrificed person behind, still breathing because the Voodoo Queen had saved her from death. "I will. I swear it," she said to him. After that, Rouge focused on the other reanimated Hokages. She felt a twinge of rage because she believed that the dead should be allowed to rest in peace and that it would be her responsibility to protect them from this terrible fate. She immediately moved to put distance between them, used her blade's special ability in conjunction with her own skills, and stopped two undead cages in their tracks. The two Mariner Lords who were still alive moved swiftly, digging their hands deep into the cage's skulls and tearing the knives from them. Get that damn knife out of their heads, it's the only way to stop this from getting worse and to set their souls free. Rouge then let go of the two warriors and started chanting a rite to peace before returning to her regular routine and sending them to rest in peace in the land of the dead. Jack also went back to his usual self, saying, "Looks like everything worked out so far, but we have to get back to the harbor to stop that son of a bitch once and for all." Knowing that she needed to provide the two siblings with as much support as possible given the impending battle for Phoenix Nest Harbor, Minerva nodded her head as she leapt off the side of the building while still in her Ice Angel form, spreading her crystal-like wings even farther as she flew back towards the fleet at high speeds.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.